Warning: the case you're about to hear was recovered from the restricted British Museum archive. Its contents have never been authorised for public release. Proceed at your own discretion. The British Museum. Sub-Basement 3. Department of Anomalous Antiquities. My name is Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Senior Archivist, Custodian of Restricted Collections. What you are about to hear has been recovered from sealed files, letters, journals, and testimonies once thought too disturbing for public record. Every statement you hear is drawn from Britain's forgotten centuries, the whispered history that hides between faith and fear. These are the National Occult Archives, filed, preserved, never closed. The following document was never intended for public release. Case file NOA 1587. Classification: Testimony of Religious Authority. Date of statement: 21st October, 1587. Location: Glenafric, Inverness, Scotland. Author: Father Duncan MacLeod, parish priest. Testimony regarding the possession at Glenafric for Father Duncan MacLeod. Do testify about the possession of Brother Callum Ross at our monastery. Brother Callum arrived from the Lowlands 3 months past. He seemed devoted to his prayers and studies. On the night of the autumn equinox, he failed to attend matins. We found him in the chapel at dawn. He knelt before the altar, but his head hung at an unnatural angle. His eyes were open, yet saw nothing of this world. When I spoke his name, another voice answered. The words were Latin, but spoken in reverse. Sutsurch sucnus et erugnis, it said again and again. I recognized the phrase when reversed. The blood of sanctified Christ. The voice was not Brother Callum's own. It came from somewhere deep within his chest. His mouth barely moved as the words emerged. I attempted to perform the rites of exorcism. The entity spoke of things buried beneath the chapel floor. It claimed to have waited 300 years for someone to disturb its rest. Brother Callum had been organizing the crypt the previous week. He mentioned finding a sealed stone with strange markings. The voice grew louder when I challenged it. Morolocep ni muchnus, it hissed. Sanctum impeccatorum, when reversed. Brother Callum's body began to convulse. His fingers bent backwards until they nearly touched his wrists. No natural movement could achieve such angles. Blood seeped from his nose and ears. I called for the other brothers to restrain him. It required 6 men to hold him still. His strength was beyond human capability. The voice continued its Latin incantations throughout the night. When dawn broke, Brother Callum suddenly fell silent. His body went completely limp. We thought he had passed. Then his eyes opened and focused on me. The voice that emerged was his own. He begged me not to let it return. He said he could feel it waiting just beneath his thoughts. It spoke to him in dreams. It showed him visions of ancient rituals performed in the glen. Brother Callum remains in our care. He refuses to enter the chapel. At night, we can hear him whispering Latin phrases in his cell. The same reverse speech, the same dark promises. Father Duncan MacLeod, Glenafric, Inverness, Scotland, 21st October, 1587. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Monastery records confirm Brother Ross remained confined for 17 months before disappearing one winter night. His cell was found empty, the door still locked from outside. Latin phrases were carved into every surface of the stone walls. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1642T. Classification: Personal account date of statement 8th March 1642. Location Rothiemurchus Forest, Cairngorms, Scotland. Author James Sinclair, travelling merchant. Account of the forest encounter. Why? James Sinclair. Do record what I witnessed while travelling through Rothiemurchus Forest. I have made this journey monthly for 15 years. I know every path and clearing. On this occasion, I travelled alone as my usual companion had taken ill. The afternoon was clear when I entered the forest. By evening, a thick mist descended between the ancient pines. I urged my horse forward, eager to reach the village before nightfall. That is when I first saw it standing among the trees. A figure dressed in garments from centuries past. The clothing resembled what monks wore in the old times. It stood perfectly still, watching me from perhaps 30 yards distant. I called out, asking if it required assistance. The figure did not respond. It simply stared with hollow eyes that reflected no light. My horse became agitated, pulling against the reins. I looked down to calm the animal. When I raised my eyes again, the figure had moved. It now stood closer, perhaps 20 yards away. I had heard no footsteps. No branches had snapped or leaves rustled. It had simply relocated in the moment I looked away. The mist seemed to gather around its form. I could see through parts of its body to the trees beyond. Terror seized me then. I drove my heels into my horse's flanks. The creature bolted forward down the path. I dared not look back for several minutes. When I finally glanced behind me, the figure stood in the middle of the path. It was now mere yards away, still silent, still watching. Its mouth hung open as if frozen mid-scream. Yet no sound emerged. My horse ran until it nearly collapsed from exhaustion. When I finally stopped, we had left the forest behind. I looked back at the tree line. The figure stood at the forest's edge. It did not pursue beyond that boundary. It simply watched until darkness fell completely. I spent that night at an inn in Aviemore. The innkeeper told me others have reported similar sightings. A monk who died in the forest 400 years ago. He was travelling alone when winter caught him unprepared. They found his body in spring, frozen against a pine tree. His mouth was open. His eyes were still wide. Since then, travellers report seeing him among the ancient trees, always watching, always silent, never leaving the forest that claimed his life. James Sinclair, Rothiemurchus Forest, Cairngorms, Scotland, 8th March, 1642. Archive note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Local records document the death of Brother Ewan in 1247. Parish records note, his spirit troubles the forest road. 3 separate accounts from different centuries describe an identical figure in matching locations along the same woodland path. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1719K. Classification. Official report. Date of statement 15th November 1719. Location Dunnottar Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Author William Fraser, Castle Steward. Report on the disturbances at Dunnottar Wars. William Fraser. Do report the continuing disturbances within the castle walls. These events began 6 weeks past. They occur primarily during the night hours. The first incident happened in the old tower. I was conducting my evening inspection. A sound came from the floor above. It resembled something heavy being dragged across stone. I climbed the stairs to investigate. The room stood empty. The sound continued above me, always 1 floor higher. I followed it to the uppermost chamber. There, the sound stopped. Silence filled the space. Then came 3 sharp knocks on the door behind me, the door I had just entered through, the door that should have led to an empty stairwell. I opened it quickly. Nothing waited on the other side. The following night, the kitchen staff heard the same dragging sound. It moved through the servants' quarters. Several witnesses testified to hearing it pass their doors. One maid opened her door to look. She saw nothing, but the sound continued past her. She described it as chains scraping stone. The third night brought more distinct sounds. Footsteps echoed through the great hall. The pattern suggested someone pacing, back and forth, for hours without pause. I entered the hall with 2 guards. The footsteps stopped the moment we crossed the threshold. We waited in silence. Then they resumed directly above our heads, in a room we knew to be empty. The guards refused to investigate further. The sounds have occurred every night since. They follow no predictable pattern. Sometimes the dragging chains, sometimes the endless pacing, sometimes voices speaking in urgent whispers. The words are never clear enough to understand. Last week, I heard music from the chapel, a single voice singing in Latin. The melody was beautiful and terrible. When I approached, the singing stopped, but I could hear breathing continuing in the darkness. Heavy, labored breathing as if from great exertion. I lit my lantern. The chapel was empty. The breathing stopped. Tonight I heard all the sounds simultaneously. The dragging chains in the tower, the pacing in the hall, the whispers in the corridors, the singing in the chapel. All occurring at once throughout the castle, as if the building itself had awakened. The servants are requesting reassignment. I cannot blame them. I have lived in this castle for 20 years. I have never feared it until now. Something has claimed these halls. It grows bolder with each passing night. William Fraser Dunnottar Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. 15th November, 1719. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Castle. Records indicate the building served as a prison during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. 167 Covenanters were imprisoned in the dungeon in 1685, many perishing in confinement. The sounds persist to this day. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1593P. Classification. Ecclesiastical record. Date of statement. 4th January 1593. Location. St Andrews, Fife, Scotland. Author. Reverend Thomas Buchanan. Record of apparition at Cathedral Ware. Reverend Thomas Buchanan. Do record the apparition witnessed in our cathedral. The phenomenon appears only at specific hours. It manifests between midnight and the first light of dawn. I first observed it while preparing for morning prayers. I arrived early to light the candles. A figure knelt in the front pew. This struck me as unusual given the hour. I approached to offer greeting. The figure did not acknowledge my presence. I drew closer and saw its appearance clearly. It wore the vestments of a bishop from centuries past. The clothing appeared solid and real. The figure's hands were clasped in prayer. Its lips moved in silent supplication. I reached out to touch its shoulder. My hand passed through as if touching mist. The figure remained unmoved by my attempt. It continued its silent prayers. I could see the pew through its translucent form. I stepped back in shock. The apparition showed no reaction to my presence. I watched it for perhaps 10 minutes. Its prayers never ceased. Its form never wavered or faded. When the first light entered through the eastern window, it simply vanished. One moment present, the next moment gone. I have since witnessed this same apparition 7 times. It appears in the identical location. It performs the identical actions. Always praying silently, always dressed in ancient vestments. I consulted the cathedral archives. Records show a Bishop Malcolm was murdered in this cathedral in the year 1204. He was struck down while at prayer. His killer was never discovered. Bishop Malcolm had been investigating corruption among the clergy. He had made powerful enemies. On the night of his death, he had remained late in prayer, seeking guidance according to witnesses. His body was found slumped in the front pew, the same location where the apparition now appears. His hands were still clasped in prayer. His lips were still moving. Guards reported he continued praying even as he died. The words were too faint to understand. Now, nearly 400 years later, he continues his supplication. Night after night, prayer after prayer. Whatever question he brought to God that night remains unanswered. Whatever guidance he sought continues to elude him. He is trapped in that moment of desperate seeking, eternal and unchanging. Reverend Thomas Buchanan St. Andrews, Fife, Scotland, 4th January 1593. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Cathedral. Records confirm Bishop Malcolm's murder. His final words were recorded as, "I must know the truth." The apparition continues to manifest on the anniversary of his death, still seeking the answer he died pursuing. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1678W. Classification: Hermit's Journal entry. Date of statement: 29 September 1678. Location: Glencoe, Argyll, Scotland. Author: Brother Angus MacDonald. Hermit Journal entry concerning the voice in the woods. I, Brother Angus MacDonald, do record what speaks to me from the forest. I have lived alone in this hermitage for 12 years. I chose this isolation to draw closer to God. The mountains provide what I need. The forest offers shelter and peace. Or it did until 3 months ago. Now something calls to me from among the trees. The voice comes always at twilight. It speaks my name in tones I almost recognize. At first, I believed it was another traveler. I would answer and search for the source. I never found anyone. The voice would move, always staying just beyond sight, always calling from deeper in the forest. I stopped responding. The voice grew more insistent. It began to speak in longer phrases. It told me things about my past, details no living person should know. It spoke of my sins before I took holy orders. It described my childhood home with perfect accuracy. It knew the names of my departed family. The voice claimed to bring messages from them. It said they waited for me in the forest. It promised I could see them again if I followed. I recognized these words as temptation. I began to pray more fervently. The voice responded by mocking my prayers. It would repeat them back to me in twisted form. Holy words made obscene through subtle changes. Last week, it began appearing closer to my dwelling. I heard it just outside my door at midnight. It whispered through the gaps in the stone. It called my name over and over. Angus, Angus, Angus. Each repetition more urgent than the last. I covered my ears but still heard it. The sound seemed to come from inside my own skull. Yesterday I made a terrible mistake. I looked out my window at twilight. Something stood at the forest edge. A figure darker than the shadows around it. It had no discernible features, just a shape that suggested human form. It raised one arm and pointed at me. The voice spoke directly into my mind. I have been here longer than your God. The words carried a weight that made my knees buckle. I fell to the floor in prayer. When I rose, the figure had gone. But the voice remains. It speaks to me constantly now, even in daylight, even when I pray. It tells me the hermitage was built on ancient ground that belonged to it long before Christianity came to these hills. It wants me to leave. It wants me to acknowledge its ownership. I will not abandon my calling, but I fear what will Maal. Come next. Brother Angus MacDonald, Glencoe, Argyll, Scotland, 29th September 1678. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Brother MacDonald's hermitage was found abandoned 6 weeks after this entry. Local shepherds reported seeing smoke from the dwelling one morning, then complete silence thereafter. His body was never recovered. The structure remains empty. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1621D. Classification. Testimony of religious authority. Date of statement 11th May 1621. Location Pluscarden Abbey, Moray, Scotland. Author Prioress Catherine Gordon. Testimony regarding Sister Margaret's affliction. I, Prioress Catherine Gordon, do testify about the possession of Sister Margaret Stewart. Sister Margaret joined our convent 8 months ago. She was devout and humble in all her duties. Her behavior changed suddenly last month. She began speaking during evening prayers. The words emerged in Latin, though she knew no Latin. Servus tenebrarum sum, she whispered. I am a servant of darkness, when translated. I thought perhaps she had memorized the phrase. But then she continued in fluent Latin. Complex theological arguments against the Church. Quotations from texts she could never have read. Her voice changed as she spoke. It became deeper, masculine, ancient. I ordered her to silence. She laughed and replied in Latin, Vestra Deus me non audit. Your God does not hear me. The other sisters grew frightened. I took Sister Margaret to a private cell. There I attempted to understand her affliction. She sat perfectly still for an hour. Then her head turned to face me. The movement was wrong, too smooth, too complete. Her neck seemed to rotate beyond natural limitation. Her eyes were wrong as well. The pupils had dilated until almost no colour remained. The voice spoke again. Ego sum qui semper fuit. I am what has always been. I demanded to know its name. It laughed through Sister Margaret's mouth. Nomina sunt pro mortales. Names are for mortals. I began the prayers of exorcism. The entity responded by making Sister Margaret's body convulse. She fell from her chair to the floor. Her back arched until only her head and heels touched the ground. No human spine should bend so severely. The Latin grew louder. It spoke of events from the Abbey's history, scandals and sins buried in our past, things no young nun could possibly know. It described the death of a prior 200 years ago, how he had been murdered by his own brothers, how his blood still stained the stones beneath the chapel. Sister Margaret's lips began to bleed. The words continued pouring forth. Hic locus meus est. This place is mine. I called for help. 3 sisters came to assist. Together, we tried to hold Sister Margaret still. Her strength was inhuman. She threw off all 4 of us. Then suddenly she fell, silent. Her body went completely limp. When she opened her eyes, they were her own again. She wept and begged forgiveness. She said she could feel it inside her. Waiting, watching through her eyes. She said it had been here long before the Abbey was built. It claimed this ground as its own. Sister Margaret remains confined. At night, we hear her speaking Latin. The same voice, the same words. Hic locus meus est. This place is mine. Prioress Catherine Gordon, Pluscarden Abbey, Moray, Scotland, 11th May 1621 archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Abbey records indicate Sister Stewart remained afflicted for 3 years before passing peacefully in her sleep. Her final words, witnessed by attending sisters, were in perfect Latin. Tandem liber sum. Finally I am free. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1745R. Classification: Landlord's account. Date of statement: 3rd December 1745. Location: Craigiever Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Author: Robert Forbes, Estate Manager. Account of the moving objects: I, Robert Forbes. Do account for the strange occurrences within Craigiever Castle. I have managed this estate for 18 years. I know every room and corridor. The phenomena began shortly after Lord Craigiever's death. Objects move when no one is present. Not occasionally. Every single day. The first incident involved books in the library. I had shelved them in perfect order. The next morning, they were rearranged. Not randomly, but deliberately. They were organized by color rather than title. I thought perhaps a servant had done this, but the servants denied entering the library. I tested this. I locked the library door myself. I kept the only key. The next morning, the books were again rearranged. This time, organized by size. The locked door remained locked. The windows were sealed shut. No one could have entered. The activity spread to other rooms. Chairs would be found moved from their positions, always to the center of the room, always facing the door, as if waiting for someone to enter. Paintings would be found turned to face the walls. Candles would be moved to form patterns on tables. Circles and symbols I did not recognize. I began leaving markers to detect intrusion. Threads across doorways. Dust left undisturbed. These markers remained intact, yet the objects still moved. One night, I decided to watch. I hid in the library and waited. For hours, nothing happened. I began to doubt my own sanity. Then, near midnight, a book lifted from the shelf. It floated across the room. No hand held it. No string supported it. It simply moved through the air. It placed itself on the reading table. The pages began to turn, one after another, as if someone invisible was reading. I tried to speak, but found myself unable. Fear had stolen my voice. Another book joined the first. Then another. Soon 6 books hovered around the table, all turning pages simultaneously. I forced myself to stand. The movement caught the attention of whatever presence shared the room. All the books stopped. They hung motionless in the air. I could feel something watching me. The temperature dropped suddenly. My breath became visible. The books fell. They crashed to the floor in perfect synchronization. Then the chandelier began to swing. No wind moved it. No tremor shook the building. It swung in wider and wider arcs. I fled the room. Behind me, I heard every book in the library fall from its shelf. The crashes continued for a full minute. When silence returned, I unlocked the door to look. Every single book lay on the floor. They formed a pattern. A perfect circle with one book in the center. The center book was opened. A single passage was visible. The dead have unfinished business. I have not entered that library since, but the activity continues throughout the castle. Every room now experiences the moving objects, as if the presence grows stronger. as if it wants to be acknowledged. Robert Forbes, Craigievar Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. 3rd December, 1745. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Lord Craigievar, died suddenly while working on extensive additions to the castle library. His final project, a comprehensive catalogue of the estate's books, was found incomplete on his desk. The library movements continue to this day. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1689V. Classification. Prison Warden's Report. Date of statement 22nd August 1689. Location Edinburgh, Tolbooth, Midlothian, Scotland. Author Malcolm Stewart. Chief Warden. Report on the whispers in the Tolbooth Burn. Malcolm Stewart. Do report the disturbing phenomenon in the prison cells. Prisoners have complained of voices for 6 weeks now. At first, I dismissed these claims as lies. Men in confinement often invent stories, but too many prisoners reported identical experiences. Men in separate cells who have never met. All describe the same voices. The whispers begin after midnight. They come from the walls themselves. The prisoners claim the voices speak in languages they cannot understand. Some recognize Latin phrases. Others hear what sounds like ancient tongues. The whispers grow louder as the night progresses. By dawn, they fade to silence. I decided to investigate personally. I spent last night in one of the affected cells. I locked myself inside to experience what the prisoners described. The cell was cold and silent for hours. I began to doubt anything would occur. Then, shortly after midnight, I heard it, a soft whisper coming from the stone wall. I pressed my ear to the cold surface. The whisper became clearer. It spoke a name I recognized. My father's name. My father has been dead for 12 years. I stepped back from the wall. The whisper continued. It spoke in my father's voice. It asked why I had not visited his grave. It accused me of forgetting him. I told myself this was impossible. But the voice knew things only my father knew. Details of my childhood, conversations we had shared, secrets I had told no one else. Another voice joined the first. This one spoke in Latin. Peccata tua te secuntur. Your sins follow you. More voices emerged. They overlapped until I could no longer distinguish individual words. The whispers became a chorus of accusation. They knew every wrong I had committed, every lie I had told, every cruelty I had inflicted. The voices grew louder and louder. I covered my ears but could still hear them. They seemed to come from inside my own head. I pounded on the door for release. The guard on duty heard my shouts. He unlocked the cell quickly. I stumbled into the corridor. Behind me, the whispers continued. I could hear them even through the closed door. I have spoken with the other guards. Several admit to hearing similar voices. They have kept silent out of fear of being thought mad. One guard claims he recognized the voice of a prisoner he once mistreated. That prisoner died in these cells 2 years ago. Another guard heard his dead mother calling his name. We have searched the walls for hidden passages. We have checked for prisoners playing tricks. We find no rational explanation. The whispers continue every night. More voices join them. They know us. They know our histories. They speak our secrets to the darkness. Malcolm Stewart, Edinburgh, Tolbooth, Midlothian, Scotland. 22nd August, 1689. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. The Tolbooth served as Edinburgh's main prison for over 400 years. Records show hundreds died within its walls from disease, neglect and execution. The structure was demolished in 1817, but excavation workers reported hearing whispers from the exposed foundations. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1702H. Classification Gamekeeper's Journal. Date of statement 16th October 1702. Location Galloway Forest, Dumfries and Galloway, Scotland. Author Donald Campbell, Gamekeeper. Journal entry regarding the forest stalker. Why Donald Campbell? Do record my encounter with something that hunts in Galloway Forest. I have worked these woods for 30 years. I know every game trail and animal den. I understand the sounds of the forest. What I heard 3 nights ago was wrong. I was checking traps near the old oak stand. Darkness had fallen earlier than expected. I prepared to return to the lodge. That is when I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy steps that crushed leaves and snapped branches. I called out, thinking another gamekeeper was nearby. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the forest. Then the steps resumed. Faster now. Moving, parallel to my path. Whatever made them stay just beyond the range of my lantern. I caught glimpses of movement between the trees, a large shape that moved with purpose. I called out again. No response came. The footsteps continued to pace me. I quickened my pace toward the lodge. The footsteps matched my speed. When I ran, it ran. When I stopped, it stopped. Always maintaining the same distance. Always staying just out of sight. I drew my knife for protection. The gesture seemed to amuse whatever followed me. I heard what could only be described as laughter. Not human laughter. Something that mimicked the sound but got it wrong. Too deep. Too hollow. I reached a clearing and risked a look back. A figure stood at the tree line, taller than any man. Its proportions were somehow incorrect. The arms hung too long. The head sat at an odd angle. It stood perfectly motionless. Then it took one step into the clearing. The moonlight revealed its form more clearly. It wore the shape of a man, but was not a man. The features were all present but arranged wrong. The eyes reflected my lantern light like an animal's. It tilted its head as it studied me. The angle was too severe. No neck should bend that way. I ran. Behind me I heard it give chase. Its footsteps thundered through the forest. Branches crashed as it pushed through the undergrowth. It moved faster than any living thing should. I burst from the tree line near the lodge. I looked back. The creature stood at the forest edge. It would not cross into the open ground. It simply watched me reach safety. Then it turned and walked back into the trees. I have hunted these forests my entire life. I have tracked bear and wolf. I have seen strange things in remote places. But nothing like this. I returned the next morning with 3 men. We found the tracks in the clearing. They resembled human footprints but were too large. 12 inches long and 6 inches wide. The stride measured over 6 feet. The tracks led deep into the forest. We followed them for 2 miles. They ended at a massive oak tree. The tracks simply stopped, as if whatever made them had climbed or vanished. We searched the area thoroughly. We found nothing else. No den or lair. No sign of where it had gone. That night, I heard the footsteps again. They circled the lodge for hours, heavy steps moving around and around. In the morning, tracks surrounded the building. The same enormous footprints. Whatever it is continues to return. Donald Campbell Galloway Forest, Dumfries and Galloway, Scotland, 16th October 1702. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Local folklore speaks of Amphir Leith, the grey man, who haunts isolated forests. Campbell's description matches similar accounts from different regions and centuries. He vanished while checking traps 2 months after writing this entry. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered. Document. Case file. NOA1738B. Classification. Innkeeper's statement. Date of statement. 9th February, 1738. Location. The Royal Oak Inn. Stirling, Scotland. Author. Margaret Douglas. Innkeeper. Statement regarding Room 7. Margaret Douglas. Do state the events concerning Room 7 at this inn. I have operated the Royal Oak for 23 years. Every room has housed countless travellers. Only Room 7 remains perpetually troubled. The problem is always the same. Guests report seeing a woman in their room. She appears at exactly 3 o'clock in the morning. She stands at the foot of the bed. She wears a white nightgown stained with something dark. Her hair hangs loose and wet. Her face shows no expression. She simply stares at whoever sleeps in the room. The first guest to report this was a merchant. He woke to find her watching him. He lit a candle to see her more clearly. She did not react to the light. She continued staring. He spoke to her. She did not respond. He rose from the bed to approach her. She remained motionless. As he reached out to touch her, she vanished. Simply ceased to exist between one moment and the next. The merchant fled the room. He refused to return. He told me the woman's eyes had been wrong, empty and cold, like looking at a corpse. Since then, every guest in that room reports the same apparition. Always at 3 in the morning, always in the same white nightgown, always staring without expression. Some guests wake to find her mere inches from their face. Others find her standing in the corner, but she always appears somewhere in the room. I stopped renting Room 7 last year. The reports became too frequent, but the woman continues her visits. I know this because I sometimes hear guests in adjacent rooms. They report hearing movement in Room 7 during the night. Footsteps pacing back and forth, the sound of water dripping. I have entered Room 7 many times. I have never seen her during daylight. But at night, the room feels wrong. The temperature drops several degrees. The air feels heavy, like something thick pressing down. Last month, I decided to spend a night in the room myself. I wanted to understand what my guests experienced. I lay in bed and waited. The room was silent and still. Then the church clock struck 3. I felt her presence before I saw her. The air grew cold. The weight increased until I struggled to breathe. I opened my eyes. She stood at the foot of the bed, exactly as described. White nightgown, wet hair, empty eyes. I tried to speak. My voice would not work. She tilted her head slowly. The movement was unnatural, mechanical. Her mouth opened. Water poured out. It flowed down her chin and chest. It pooled on the floor beneath her. The smell of rot filled the room. She reached toward me. Her fingers were bloated and pale. I forced myself to move. I rolled from the bed and ran for the door. Behind me, I heard her footsteps following. Wet slaps against the wooden floor. I reached the door and pulled it open. I turned back. The room was empty. No woman, no water, no footprints. Just a heavy feeling in the air. I sealed Room 7 the next morning. The door remains locked, but sometimes at night I hear her pacing. The same wet footsteps moving back and forth. Margaret Douglas, The Royal Oak Inn, Stirling, Scotland, 9th February, 1738. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Inn. Records indicate a woman named Eleanor Ross drowned in a nearby stream in 1695. Her body was temporarily stored in what is now Room 7 before burial. Witnesses reported her eyes remained open after death. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1654L. Classification: Priest's confession. Date of statement: 27th July 1654. Location: Iona Abbey, Inner Hebrides, Scotland. Author: Father Kenneth MacKinnon. Confession of Father Kenneth MacKinnon. Quotes Father Kenneth MacKinnon. Do confess what has possessed me these past months. I fear I am no longer alone in my own body. Something shares this vessel with me. It began when I was transcribing ancient texts in the Abbey Library. I discovered a manuscript hidden behind other volumes. The pages were very old. The Latin was unusual. Not the ecclesiastical Latin I knew, something older and stranger. I attempted to translate the text. As I spoke the words aloud, the candles in the library flickered. I felt something cold enter the room. It pressed against my back. Then it pressed inside me. I cannot better describe the sensation. One moment I was alone. The next moment I was not. Since that day, I have felt its presence constantly. It watches through my eyes. It listens through my ears. Sometimes it speaks through my mouth. The first time this happened, I was leading morning prayers. I began the familiar liturgy. Midway through, different words emerged. Latin words I had not intended to speak. Ille qui vincit in infernum. He who conquers in hell. The other priest stared at me. I tried to stop speaking. I could not control my own voice. It continued reciting dark verses, inversions of Holy Scripture, blasphemies I would never utter willingly. After several minutes, it released its control. I collapsed to the floor. The brothers helped me to my chamber. They assumed illness had overcome me. I did not correct them. How could I explain that something had used me? The possessions have become more frequent. 3 or 4 times each day now. It takes control without warning. It makes me walk to places I do not choose. It forces my hands to write in the ancient Latin. Pages and pages of text I cannot comprehend. When I read them later, I understand their meaning. They are instructions, rituals for summoning what should not be summoned, methods for opening doorways that should remain closed. I have burned these pages, but my hands write more, always more. Last night was the worst episode yet. I woke at midnight to find myself standing in the Abbey cemetery. I held a shovel. I had been digging. Several graves lay open. I had no memory of leaving my chamber. No memory of taking the shovel. No memory of digging. The entity had controlled me completely. It had used my body while my consciousness slept. I filled in the graves and returned to my chamber. This morning, I discovered dirt under my fingernails. Proof it had not been a dream. I can feel it growing stronger. Each possession lasts longer than the last. Each time it releases me, I am weaker. I fear it is replacing me. Soon, there will be nothing of Kenneth MacKinnon left. Only this thing wearing my shape. I have tried exorcism. I have tried fasting and prayer. Nothing diminishes its power. I am writing this while I still can, while I still have control of my own hand. I do not know how much longer that will last. If you find this confession, know that whatever walks in my body is not me. Do not trust anything it says. Do not read anything it writes. And whatever you do not speak the words from the hidden manuscript. Father Kenneth MacKinnon, Iona Abbey, Inner Hebrides, Scotland, 27th July 1654. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Father McKinnon was found dead in his chamber 3 weeks after writing this confession. The manuscript he referenced has never been located. Abbey records note that McKinnon wrote 17 volumes of text in unknown languages during his final month. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1726N. Classification: Shepherd's account. Date of statement: 5th April 1726. Location: the Killins, Isle of Skye, Scotland. Author: Hamish MacLeod. Shepherd, account of the moorland apparition. Hamish MacLeod, do account for what I saw upon the moors. I have tended sheep on these hills for 40 years. I know every path and hollow. I know the patterns of weather and wildlife. What I encountered defies all natural understanding. It was late afternoon when I noticed one of my sheep had wandered. I followed its tracks across the moorland. The trail led toward the old standing stones. Few venture near those ancient markers. Local tradition warns against them, but I needed to retrieve my animal. As I approached the stones, fog rolled in suddenly, thick and unnatural. It moved against the wind. It seemed to flow from the stones themselves. I heard my sheep bleating in distress. The sound came from within the fog. I entered cautiously. Visibility dropped to mere feet. The standing stones loomed like giants in the mist. Then I saw her. A woman in ancient dress stood among the stones. Her clothing belonged to an age long past. She faced away from me. Her posture was rigid, unnaturally still. I called out, asking if she required assistance. She did not respond. She did not move. I walked closer. The fog grew denser with each step. When I came within 10 yards, she turned. The movement was wrong, too smooth and slow, as if underwater. Her face was pale as death. Her eyes were completely black, no white, no color, just perfect darkness. She opened her mouth. No sound emerged, but I heard her voice inside my mind. This place remembers blood. The words carried images with them. I saw sacrifices performed at these stones, rituals from millennia past. I saw priests in robes leading victims. I saw the stones running red. I saw countless lives ended in devotion to gods whose names are forgotten. The woman continued speaking without sound. I was the first. I opened the way. Now I cannot close it. Now I cannot leave. She reached toward me. Her arm extended impossibly far. The distance between us should have made contact impossible. Yet her hand touched my chest. Ice spread through my body. My heart slowed. My breath became labored. She showed me her truth. She had been a priestess. She had performed the first sacrifice at these stones. She had opened a doorway to something beyond. She had believed she was serving divine powers. She had been wrong. What came through was not divine. It had claimed her as payment. It had bound her to this place. For 3,000 years she had stood here, watching, waiting, unable to leave, unable to die. The entity that claimed her remained nearby. She served as its anchor to this world. She warned me to leave. Her hand released my chest. I stumbled backward. The fog began to clear. She faded with the mist. Her final words echoed in my thoughts. Do not return after sunset. I found my sheep near the stones. It was dead. Its heart had stopped. No marks on its body. No sign of violence. Simply dead. I carried the animal down from the moors. I have not returned to the standing stones. But at night, I sometimes see fog gathering there, thick and unnatural, moving against the wind. And within the fog, a pale figure standing motionless, eternal, imprisoned. Hamish MacLeod, The Quillins, Isle of Skye, Scotland, 5th April, 1726. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, archaeological surveys of the Skye standing stones revealed evidence of ritual activity dating back to the Bronze Age. Excavation uncovered human remains showing signs of ceremonial death. Local shepherds continue to report fog and apparitions near the site. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1697 S classification. Church record. Date of statement 18th December 1697. Location St Giles Cathedral, Edinburgh. Midlothian, Scotland. Author William Erskine, Sexton. Record of the bell tower haunting. Why? William Erskine. Do record the phenomena occurring in the cathedral bell tower. I have served as sexton for 11 years. My duties include maintenance of the bells and tower. 3 months ago, the bells began ringing at irregular hours. Not the proper times for calling the faithful. Random moments throughout the day and night. I initially suspected mischief, perhaps children climbing the tower. I secured the tower door with a new lock. Only I possessed the key. The bells continued to ring. I climbed to investigate. The bell chamber was empty, no sign of intrusion. Yet as I stood there, one bell began to swing. No rope pulled it, no hand moved it. It swung on its own. The sound it produced was wrong, not the clear tone we hear during services, a discordant note that hurt to hear. The other bells joined it. All four began swinging simultaneously. The noise was deafening. I covered my ears but could not block the sound. Then I saw him. A figure stood in the corner. He wore the robes of a sexton from centuries past. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken. He stared at me with what I can only describe as desperation. He pointed upward, to the ceiling of the bell chamber. I looked where he indicated. I saw nothing unusual. When I looked back, he had moved closer. He stood directly before me. His mouth opened and closed. He appeared to be speaking, but no sound emerged beyond the clanging bells. He pointed upward again, more insistently. Then he simply faded. The bells stopped swinging. Silence filled the tower. I examined the ceiling carefully. The ancient wood showed its age. Centuries of weather had darkened the beams. Then I noticed something. Marks carved into one beam. Words scratched into the wood. Buried beneath. Find me. Let me rest. I returned with tools and 2 other men. We pulled up the floorboards. Beneath the tower floor, we found bones. A complete skeleton wrapped in rotted fabric. The remains of a sexton's robe. We discovered a record book nearby. The pages had mostly deteriorated, but one entry remained legible. It documented the disappearance of Sexton Andrew Ross in the year 1531. He had climbed the tower to inspect damage after a storm. He never returned. The tower was searched. No trace of him was found. Now we understood. He had fallen through rotten boards. He had become trapped in the crawl space beneath the floor. No one had heard his cries for help. He had died alone in the darkness. We gave him proper burial in the churchyard. A stone marks his grave. It bears his name and the year he disappeared. The bells have not rung irregularly since. The tower stands quiet. But sometimes when I climb to the bell chamber, I feel watched. A presence that follows my movement. nothing malevolent, simply aware. Perhaps Andrew Ross still tends his post. Perhaps death did not release him from his duties. Perhaps he will forever walk those stairs, forever inspect those bells, forever guard the tower that became his tomb. William Erskine, St. Giles Cathedral, Edinburgh, Midlothian, Scotland, 18th December, 1697. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Cathedral records confirm the burial of Andrew Ross's remains in December 1697. Current sextons report occasional bell sounds when the tower is empty. The phenomenon occurs most frequently near the anniversary of Ross's estimated death in February 1531. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1741G. Classification: Merchant's Journal. Date of statement: 23rd June 1741. Location: Glenfinnan Forest, Lochaber, Scotland. Author: Edward Murray, travelling merchant. Journal entry of forest pursuit I. Edward Murray. Do journal what pursued me through Glenfinnan Forest. I have travelled this route twice monthly for 8 years. The forest path is familiar territory. I have never feared it until yesterday. I entered the forest at midday. The weather was clear. The journey should have been routine. An hour into the forest, I heard movement in the undergrowth. Something large paralleled my path. I assumed it was a deer or wild pig. I continued without concern. The movement kept pace with me. Whatever it was matched my speed exactly. I stopped. It stopped. I started again. It resumed immediately. I called out to identify myself. Perhaps it was another traveller. No response came, just continued movement through the trees. I quickened my pace. It matched me. I broke into a run. It ran as well, but now it drew closer. I could hear it crashing through branches. Heavy footfalls shook the ground. Whatever pursued me was massive. I risked a glance behind. A shape moved between the trees, dark and formless. It seemed to shift and change as it ran, sometimes appearing almost human, sometimes more bestial. Its eyes glowed with reflected light, yellow and predatory. I ran faster than I thought possible. My lungs burned. My legs screamed in protest. Behind me, the pursuit intensified. It was gaining. I could hear its breathing, deep, rasping breaths that sounded like grinding stone. It was mere yards behind me. I could smell something foul, rot and decay, the stench of things long dead. I burst into a clearing. Sunlight struck me like a physical blow. I stumbled and fell. I turned to face my pursuer. It stood at the tree line. The full light of day revealed its form. It was tall as 3 men. Its body suggested human structure, but corrupted. Arms too long, legs bent wrong. Its face was a nightmare. Features that almost resembled humanity, but stretched and distorted. Its mouth hung open, rows of teeth like broken glass. It stepped toward the clearing edge. 1 foot crossed into the sunlight. The creature recoiled. It hissed in pain or anger. It retreated into shadow. There it stood, watching, waiting. I remained in the clearing for 3 hours, too terrified to move. The creature never left. It paced at the forest edge, always staying in shadow, always keeping those yellow eyes fixed on me. Eventually, I noticed the sun's position. Afternoon was fading. Soon darkness would fall. The thought filled me with terror. When the creature could leave the shadows, nothing would protect me. I forced myself to stand. I began backing toward the opposite tree line. The creature tracked my movement. It moved parallel to me, still in shadow, still waiting. I reached the trees. A road lay just beyond. I ran for it. Behind me, I heard the creature roar, a sound like mountains splitting. I reached the road as the sun touched the horizon. I looked back one final time. The creature stood fully in view, massive and terrible. It pointed one elongated finger at me. Then it turned and walked back into the forest depths. I hired a guard to accompany me through that stretch of forest now. He thinks me foolish for wasting coin on protection. But when we pass through, I see his unease. He feels it too. Something watches from the trees. Something waits for the day we travel alone. Edward Murray, Glenfinnan Forest, Lochaber, Scotland. Scotland, 23rd June, 1741. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Scottish folklore describes the Bodach, a dark being that dwells in forests and pursues travellers. Murray's description matches similar encounters recorded across 3 centuries. He disappeared while travelling that same route 2 years after writing this entry. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1709. Classification: Gravedigger's statement. Date of statement: 14th March 1709. Location: Greyfriars Kirkyard, Edinburgh, Midlothian, Scotland. Author: Thomas Grant, gravedigger. Statement regarding the Kirkyard visitor. I, Thomas Grant, do state what visits Greyfriars Kirkyard at night. I have worked this graveyard for 19 years. I am not easily frightened. Death and I are old companions. But what I have witnessed these past months defies natural law. It began in autumn when the nights grew long. I was finishing my duties near the Covenanters' prison. This section of the kirkyard holds those who died for their faith. The area has always felt heavy. The air presses down there, as if the weight of history bears upon that ground. I was preparing to leave when I saw movement. A figure walked among the graves, not unusual in itself. Visitors often come to pay respects, but something about this figure was wrong. It moved with strange grace, too smooth, too fluid. I called out to warn them the kirkyard was closing. The figure stopped. It turned to face me. Even from distance, I could see its form clearly. It wore clothes from another era, 17th century style, the period when the Covenanters were imprisoned and executed. The figure raised one hand, not in greeting, in warning. Then it walked directly through a headstone, not around it, through it, as if the solid stone was mere mist. I stood frozen. The figure continued walking among the graves. It paused at certain markers. It seemed to study the names. Then it would move to the next. I followed at a distance. Curiosity overcame my fear. The figure led me deeper into the Covenanters' section. It stopped at one particular grave. It knelt beside the marker. I drew close enough to read the name: George Heriot, executed 1685 for his faith. The figure reached toward the grave. Its hand passed into the earth, not digging, simply passing through solid ground as if it were air. I watched in horror and fascination. The figure withdrew its hand. It held something I could not quite see, something that glowed faintly. The figure stood. It turned to face me directly. Its features became clear in the moonlight. The face was pale and drawn. The eyes were hollow, not empty, but containing depths I could not fathom. It spoke. The voice sounded like wind through empty corridors. They will not rest. We will not rest until we are remembered. Then it faded, not walked away, simply ceased to exist. One moment present, the next moment gone. I have seen it 7 more times since that night, always in the Covenanters section, always moving among the graves, always checking the markers. Sometimes it is joined by others, figures in similar dress, all from that same dark period. They walk together through the kirkyard. They visit graves. They touch the stones. They speak to each other in voices I cannot hear. I have tried to approach them. They vanish when I draw too near. I have tried to document their appearances. They do not appear consistently. Some nights they walk. Some nights the kirkyard stands empty. Last week, I witnessed something new. I saw them gathered around one grave. 20 figures stood in a circle. They seemed to be praying, or perhaps mourning. Then they all looked up simultaneously. They turned toward me as one. 20 pairs of hollow eyes. They raised their hands in unison, pointing at me, warning me, or perhaps inviting me. I do not know which. I fled the kirkyard that night. I have not returned after dark since. But during daylight hours, I see signs of their presence. Footprints in the dew around graves. Stones moved from their original positions. Flowers placed on markers that had none. The dead of Greyfriars do not rest. They walk. They remember. They wait for the living to remember them too. Thomas Grant Greyfriars Kirkyard, Edinburgh, Midlothian, Scotland, 14th March, 1709. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Over 1,200 Covenanters were imprisoned in Greyfriars Kirkyard in 1679, with many dying from exposure and starvation. The area known as the Covenanters' Prison remains the most reported location for paranormal activity in Scotland. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document, case file, NOA 1632F, classification. Constable's report. Date of statement, 7th November, 1632. Location, Aberfoyle Forest, Stirlingshire, Scotland. Author, Constable James McIntyre. Report on the figure in the woods or Constable James McIntyre. Do report my encounter in Aberfoyle Forest. I was investigating reports of livestock theft. Several sheep had vanished from farms near the forest edge. Farmers claimed something took the animals at night. I entered the forest at midday to search for evidence. The path was clear and well travelled. I found no immediate signs of predators or thieves. 2 hours into my search, the forest changed. The light dimmed, though the sun still rode high. The air grew cold. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Silence pressed in from all sides. I continued forward. My duty required thorough investigation. That is when I saw the first symbol. It was carved into a tree trunk at eye level, a circle within a circle. Strange markings filled the space between. I recognized nothing. The carving was fresh. Sap still wept from the cuts. I found more symbols as I walked. Every 10th tree bore a marking. They formed a trail leading deeper into the forest. Against better judgment, I followed them. The path led to a clearing I had never seen before. The ground was perfectly circular. No grass grew within its bounds. The earth was black and hard. At the clearing's center stood a figure. It faced away from me, completely motionless. It wore a dark cloak that hung to the ground. I called out to identify myself. The figure did not respond. I called again. Still no response. I approached cautiously. My hand rested on my weapon. I came within 20 paces. The figure turned. The movement was impossibly fast. One moment facing away, the next moment facing me. No transition between positions. The cloak hid most of its form. but I saw its hands. They were not human hands. The fingers were too long, too many joints, ending in points rather than fingernails. The face within the hood was worse. I cannot properly describe what I saw. Features that suggested humanity, but were not human. Skin too pale, eyes too large, mouth stretching too wide. It smiled at me. The expression held no warmth, no humanity, pure malevolence. It raised one of those impossible hands. It pointed at me. Then it pointed at the ground, at my feet. I looked down. A symbol had been carved into the earth, the same circle within circle design from the trees. But this one glowed faintly red. When I looked up, the figure had moved closer, now within 10 paces. I had not heard it approach. It tilted its head at an unnatural angle. Studying me, it opened its mouth. No sound emerged, but I heard words inside my mind. You were called. The marks were for you. This place chooses its own. I drew my weapon. The figure laughed silently. It spread its arms. The cloak fell away. What stood revealed was neither man nor beast, something between, something impossible. I fired my pistol. The shot struck center mass. The figure did not react. No blood, no wound. The ball simply disappeared into it. It stepped toward me. I ran. Behind me I heard no pursuit, but I felt its presence following, always just beyond sight. I crashed through undergrowth. I ignored paths. I simply fled. When I finally emerged from the forest, I looked back. The figure stood at the tree line, still watching, still smiling. It raised one hand, beckoned me to return. Then it stepped backwards into shadow, into darkness that should not exist in daylight. It vanished completely. I reported my findings to the magistrate. He dispatched others to investigate. They found the clearing. They found the symbols. But they found no figure. The clearing's earth remained black and barren. Nothing grows there still. Sheep continue to disappear. I refused to enter that forest again. Constable James McIntyre, Aberfoyle Forest, Stirlingshire, Scotland, 7th November, 1632. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Aberfoyle Forest, features prominently in Scottish fairy lore, considered a thin place where the natural and supernatural overlap. Reverend Robert Kirk wrote extensively about such encounters before vanishing in the same forest in 1692. His body was found on Fairy No. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1756Q. Classification. Physician's notes. Date of statement 19th January 1756. Location: Inverness Royal Infirmary, Inverness-shire, Scotland. Author: Dr. Alexander Grant. Physician: Physician's notes on patient Margaret Blair Worse. Dr. Alexander Grant. Do note the peculiar case of Margaret Blair. She was admitted 14 days ago with symptoms of possession. Her family brought her after 3 weeks of escalating behavior. Margaret had been a healthy woman of 28 years. She worked as a seamstress in the town. No history of illness or mental disturbance. The change came suddenly. She woke one morning speaking fluent Latin. She had received no formal education. She knew only English and some Gaelic. Yet she spoke Latin as if native to the tongue. The words were not simple phrases. She engaged in complex theological discourse. She quoted texts I recognized from the Vatican Library, books that exist nowhere in Scotland. I attempted to determine if she had somehow studied in secret. Her family confirmed she had never left Inverness. She had never attended any school beyond basic reading. I asked her to explain how she knew these texts. She responded in Latin, Ille qui docet in tenebris, he who teaches in darkness. Her voice changed when speaking these words, deeper than her natural tone, masculine and ancient. I requested she speak English. She smiled and complied, but the voice remained changed. It told me about my own past, things I had never shared with anyone, sins I had committed in my youth, mistakes I had buried in memory. The entity speaking through Margaret knew everything. I asked its name. It laughed. Nomina sunt vincula. Names are chains. It would not be bound by naming. I began documentation of her symptoms. Her physical signs were troubling. Her temperature dropped below normal human range, yet she showed no signs of hypothermia. Her pulse was slow but steady. Her pupils remained constricted even in dim light. Most disturbing was her strength. It required 3 orderlies to restrain her during episodes. She threw grown men across the room. Her body should not possess such power. I attempted various treatments, cold baths to shock the system, herbal drafts to calm the mind. Nothing affected her condition. The entity mocked each attempt. It spoke in Latin about the futility of medicine. Corpus est templum. The body is a temple. Ego sum Deus qui habitat intus. I am the God who dwells within. Yesterday brought new developments. Margaret began writing during the night. The orderlies found her sitting upright in bed. Her eyes were closed. Her hand moved across paper at incredible speed. She wrote pages of text, all in Latin, all in perfect script despite her closed eyes. I examined these writings. They contain knowledge beyond any physician's understanding, detailed anatomical descriptions of the human body, information not yet discovered by medical science. The text described organs and systems with perfect accuracy. It explained diseases and their true causes. Some of what it wrote contradicts current medical theory, yet I suspect it may be correct. The entity has access to knowledge we do not possess. This morning, Margaret spoke in her own voice. She begged me to help her. She said she was trapped inside her own body. She could see and hear everything, but she could not control her actions. The entity had imprisoned her. It used her as a vessel. She said it grew stronger each day. Soon she would be gone completely. Only it would remain. I have consulted with religious authorities. They have agreed to attempt exorcism, but I fear it may be too late. The entity is deeply rooted. It has claimed Margaret entirely. Dr. Alexander Grant, Inverness Royal Infirmary, Inverness Shire, Scotland. 19th January 1756. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Hospital records indicate Margaret Blair remained in confinement for 8 months. She passed peacefully in September 1756. Her final words, spoken in her own voice, were, "Thank you for trying." The pages she wrote were donated to medical archives. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1618Y. Classification. Lighthouse Keeper's Log. Date of statement. 26th August, 1618. Location. Bell Rock Lighthouse, Angus, Scotland. Author, John Murray, Lighthouse Keeper. Log entry of the drowned visitor. Why? John Murray, do log what visits the lighthouse during storms. I have kept this light for 7 years. I am accustomed to isolation. The sea and I understand each other. But 3 nights ago, the sea sent something I cannot explain. A storm had raged for 2 days. Waves crashed against the tower with terrible force. I remained in the lamp room maintaining the light. Near midnight, I heard knocking on the door below. This seemed impossible. The nearest land was miles distant. No boat could survive these seas. I descended the stairs cautiously. The knocking continued, steady and insistent. I opened the door. A man stood on the platform. He was soaked through. Water streamed from his clothes and hair. He said nothing, just stared at me with empty eyes. I asked how he had come to be here. He did not answer. He pushed past me into the lighthouse. Water pooled wherever he walked. I followed him up the stairs. He moved directly to the lamp room. He stood at the window facing the sea. I demanded to know who he was. He finally spoke. His voice sounded waterlogged, as if speaking from beneath the surface. I was keeper here before you. This struck me as odd. The lighthouse was new. I was the first keeper assigned. No one had served before me. I told him this. He turned to face me. His skin was pale and bloated. His eyes reflected no light. I built this light. I died before it was finished. Now I tended still. I remembered the stories. A mason had fallen during construction. He was swept into the sea. His body was never recovered. "Are you Robert Campbell?" I asked. He nodded slowly. Water dripped from his hair with each movement. The light must stay lit. Always lit. I failed to see it finished in life. I finish it now in death. He returned his gaze to the sea. I stood uncertain what to do. The storm continued to rage outside. Lightning illuminated the waves. In each flash I saw others, figures standing in the water, dozens of them, all staring at the lighthouse, all with the same empty eyes. I turned to Robert Campbell. "Who are they?" "The drowned. The sea takes many. We are all drawn to the light." The storm passed near dawn. As the first rays of sunlight appeared, Campbell began to fade. He became translucent. I could see through him to the window beyond. He looked at me one final time. "Keep the light burning." Then he was gone. Only water remained where he had stood. I have seen him 5 more times since that night. He appears only during storms, always soaked, always silent, except to say those same words. "Keep the light burning." Last week, the lamp oil ran low. I had ordered more, but the supply ship was delayed. That night, a storm struck. I tried to maintain the light with what remained. The flame began to flicker. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Robert Campbell appeared in the doorway. His expression showed distress. The light must not fail. He moved to the lamp. He reached toward it. Where his hand passed near the flame, it burned brighter, impossibly bright. The lamp blazed through the night, despite the oil being depleted, despite the laws of nature. The light burned until dawn. I checked the reservoir. It was bone dry. Yet the lamp had burned for hours. I understand now. Robert Campbell keeps this light. I am merely its temporary guardian. He is its eternal keeper. When I eventually leave or pass, he will remain, tending the light he died building, guiding ships away from the rocks that claimed him. John Murray Bell Rock Lighthouse, Angus, Scotland, 26th August, 1618. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, construction records confirm Robert Campbell, master mason, fell from the lighthouse scaffolding on March 14, 1611. His body was never recovered. Subsequent lighthouse keepers have reported similar encounters. always during severe storms. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1673. Classification. Mining record. Date of statement 2nd October 1673. Location Lead Hills Mining District, South Lanarkshire, Scotland. Author William Douglas, mine foreman. Record of the incident in Shaft 7. William Douglas, do record what happened in Shaft 7. The mine has operated for 40 years. We extract lead from deep veins. The work is dangerous but profitable. Shaft 7 was opened 8 months ago. It reached deeper than any previous excavation. The first problems began immediately. Tools would vanish. Men would hear voices calling their names. Strange lights appeared in the tunnels. I dismissed these as minor superstition. Men in darkness imagine things. Fear plays tricks on the mind. But the incidents continued. 2 weeks ago, 3 miners refused to enter Shaft 7. They claimed something watched them from the depths. They heard breathing in the darkness. Heavy, rasping breaths that came from below. I accompanied them myself to investigate. We descended with lamps and equipment. The shaft was silent. No unusual sounds, no signs of danger. I ordered the men to resume work. They obeyed reluctantly. I remained to observe. That is when I heard it, a sound from deeper in the shaft. Not breathing, something more deliberate. Tapping, metal striking stone, rhythmic and steady. I called out, asking if anyone worked below. The tapping stopped. Silence returned. Then it resumed. Faster now, more urgent. I took a lamp and descended further. The tunnel narrowed as it dropped. The tapping grew louder with each step. It came from just ahead, around the next bend. I turned the corner. The tunnel ended in a natural cave. We had broken through into an existing cavity. This had not been noted in the survey. In the center of the cave stood a figure. It wore miner's clothing from another era, decades old by the style. It held a pick. It struck the wall methodically. Tap, tap, tap. I called to it. The figure stopped. It turned to face me. Its features were wrong. The skin was grey as stone. The eyes were hollow pits. The mouth hung open in a permanent scream. It raised its pick. For a moment, I thought it would attack. Instead, it pointed at the wall behind me. I turned to look. Carved into the stone were words. Turn back. Sealed for a reason. Do not wake what sleeps. When I turned again, the figure was gone. Only its pick remained, lying on the cave floor. I examined it closely. The metal was ancient. The wood was petrified. It should not exist in that condition. I gathered the miners, and we returned to the surface. I reported my findings to the mine owner. He ordered Shaft 7 sealed. The decision came too late. That night, we heard sounds from the mine. Terrible sounds. Screaming. Not human screaming. Something else. Something vast and furious. The ground shook. Several buildings in the mining camp collapsed. We found Shaft 7 had collapsed entirely. The entire tunnel had caved in, as if something had pulled it down from inside. We attempted to clear the debris. We found no bodies, but we found marks in the fallen stone. Claw marks. Massive gouges that no tool could make. Something had torn through solid rock. We heard the tapping again, last night, coming from beneath the seal shaft, steady and insistent. Tap, tap, tap. The warning echoes in my mind. Do not wake what sleeps. I fear we have awakened it, and it is furious. William Douglas Lead Hills Mining District, South Lanarkshire, Scotland, 2nd October 1673. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Mine records indicate Shaft 7 was permanently sealed. Geological surveys suggest miners broke into a natural cave system of unknown age. Similar mining disasters were reported in adjacent shafts over the following decade. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1782K. Classification: Widow's testimony. Date of statement: 11th July 1782. Location: Stirling Castle, Stirlingshire, Scotland. Author: Eleanor MacDonald. Castle resident. Testimony regarding the weeping in the walls. Why Eleanor MacDonald? Do testify about the sounds within Stirling Castle walls. My husband served as castle guard for 20 years. We resided in the East Wing chambers. I have lived here since our marriage. I thought I knew every sound these ancient walls make. 6 months ago, I began hearing something new. It started as soft crying, distant and muffled. I assumed it came from another chamber, perhaps a child upset or a servant in distress. But when I searched, I found no one. The crying continued night after night, always starting at the same hour, 10 o'clock precisely. It would last until midnight, then silence would return. My husband heard it too. We tried to locate its source. The sound seemed to move through the walls. One moment here, the next moment there, always just beyond reach. We pressed our ears to the stone. The crying was clearer there, a woman's voice, young and desperate. She wept as if her heart was breaking. I began to hear words within the sobs, Scottish words. Moleanab, my baby, over and over. Moleanab. She was mourning a child. I consulted the castle historian. He researched the records. He found a tragic story. In 1546, a servant girl lived in our chambers. Her name was Janet Kerr. She gave birth in secret. The father was unknown, perhaps a nobleman who would not acknowledge the child. The baby was born sickly. It lived only 3 days. Janet was forbidden from burying the child in consecrated ground. Illegitimate children were denied such dignity. In her grief, she hid the small body within the walls. She sealed it in a cavity between stones. She performed her own blessing, her own prayer for its soul. Then she took her own life by jumping from the castle ramparts. Her body was buried in unmarked ground. The historian said the chambers had been renovated many times. New walls built over old. The baby's resting place had been buried deeper, lost to history. But Janet had not forgotten. The crying intensified after I learned this story, as if Janet knew someone finally understood. The words became clearer. Moleanab, kaite abhailtu. My baby, where are you? She was searching, calling through the walls, unable to find what she had hidden. Last week, I decided to help her. I requested permission to examine the walls. I explained the situation to the castle administrator. He was skeptical but agreed. We brought masons to carefully expose the original wall. They removed newer additions stone by stone. Behind 3 layers of construction, we found it. A small cavity sealed with mortar. Inside lay the tiny skeleton, still wrapped in rotted linen. I wept when I saw it. So small, so forgotten. We gave the child proper burial in the castle cemetery. I had a stone carved. Baby Kerr, born and died 1546, now at peace with your mother. That night, I heard the crying one final time, but it was different. The desperation was gone. The words changed. Tapad lead. Thank you. Then silence fell. Permanent silence. The walls no longer echo with grief. Janet has found her child. They rest together now. Eleanor MacDonald Stirling Castle, Stirlingshire, Scotland. 11th July 1782. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Castle. Records confirm Janet Kerr's death in June 1546. The small grave in the castle cemetery remains marked and maintained. No further reports of weeping have been documented in the East Wing chambers. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1647P. Classification. Abbott's Journal. Date of statement. 23rd April, 1647. Location, Melrose Abbey. Scottish Borders, Scotland. Author, Abbot Thomas Morrison. Journal entry. Concerning the crypt visitor. I, Abbot Thomas Morrison, do journal what walks in our crypt. The Abbey has stood for 500 years. Countless brothers have been laid to rest beneath it. The crypt holds generations of faithful servants. We visit regularly to pray for their souls. The space has always felt solemn, peaceful despite the presence of death. That changed 3 months ago. A brother went to the crypt for evening prayers. He emerged minutes later in a state of terror. He claimed someone else was down there, standing among the tombs, watching him. I dismissed his account as nervous imagination. The crypt is dim and full of shadows. The mind can conjure phantoms in such places. But 3 more brothers reported the same experience. Always the same description. A figure in monk's robes, standing motionless among the dead, never speaking, never moving, just watching. I decided to investigate personally. I descended alone carrying a lantern. The crypt was silent. Row upon row of stone tombs stretched into darkness. I walked among them slowly. I called out to identify myself. No response came. I continued deeper into the crypt. The light from my lantern cast dancing shadows. Each shadow seemed to contain hidden forms. I stopped at the far end of the space. The oldest tombs lay here. Brothers from the Abbey's founding. Their names were worn from the stone. That is when I sensed the presence. Someone stood behind me. I turned quickly. A figure in monk's robe stood 10 paces away. The hood obscured its face completely. It stood perfectly still. I called to it, asking its name. It did not respond. I stepped closer. It remained motionless. I came within arm's reach. I could see nothing within the hood. Just darkness. Complete absence of light. I reached out to pull back the hood. My hand passed through empty air. The figure was not solid. It was an image. A projection of something that once was. The hood turned towards me. Though I could see no face, I felt its gaze. It raised one hand. A skeletal finger pointed past me. I turned to look. One of the oldest tombs had cracked. The stone lid had shifted. I approached cautiously. The crack was recent. I could see into the tomb's interior. A body lay within as expected, but it was not properly positioned. The skeleton's arms were raised. The hands pressed against the underside of the lid. The fingers were broken and bent. This person had been buried alive. They had woken in their tomb. They had died trying to escape. I turned back to the hooded figure. It pointed to its own chest. Then it pointed to the broken tomb. Understanding struck me like a blow. This was the tomb's occupant. This brother had been sealed alive. Whether by accident or malice, he had suffered terribly. He had died in darkness and suffocating fear. Now he walked the crypt, still trapped, still suffering. I arranged for the tomb to be properly opened. We gave the remains new blessing. We prayed for his soul's release. We apologized for his torment. That night, I returned to the crypt. The hooded figure stood beside his open tomb. He turned to face me. He bowed slowly. Then he faded like morning mist. The crypt has been peaceful since. No more figures among the tombs. No more watching presences. The brother finally found his rest. But I think of him often, of his final hours sealed in stone, of centuries spent walking in darkness. Some deaths do not end with the body's failure. Some suffering continues beyond the grave. Abbot Thomas Morrison, Melrose Abbey. Abbey, Scottish Borders, Scotland, 23rd April, 1647. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Abbey records note, a brother Edmund died suddenly in 1153 during a fever outbreak. The haste of mass burials during plagues occasionally resulted in premature interment. His tomb now bears a marker acknowledging his suffering and peace. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1715W. Classification Teacher's account. Date of statement 6th December 1715. Location Aberdeen Grammar School, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Author Margaret Sinclair. Schoolmistress. Account of the children's voices. I, Margaret Sinclair, do account for the voices heard in the schoolroom. I have taught at this school for 12 years. The building is old but well maintained. It has served as a school for over 2 centuries. Countless children have learned within these walls. Last month, I began staying late to prepare lessons. The building empties by 5 o'clock. Only I remain. I appreciate the quiet for concentration. One evening, I heard children's voices from the classroom above. This seemed odd, as all students had departed. I climbed the stairs to investigate. The room was empty. I checked the corridors. No one was present. I returned to my work. An hour later, the voices came again, louder this time, the sound of children reciting lessons. I recognized the rhythm. Latin conjugations spoken in unison. I went upstairs again. Again, I found no one. This pattern continued over several evenings. Always the same time. Always the same lesson recitation. Always the empty classroom. I mentioned this to the headmaster. He seemed unsurprised. He said others had reported similar experiences. Teachers working late often heard the voices. He showed me old records. In 1645, plague struck Aberdeen. The school was converted to a temporary hospital. 50 children died here. They were learning their lessons when illness struck. Many died while still attempting to recite, trying to prove they had learned despite their suffering. The headmaster said their voices returned sometimes, still reciting, still trying to prove their knowledge. I thought this explanation fanciful, until last night. I was working later than usual. Near midnight, I heard the voices begin. I went upstairs immediately. I flung open the classroom door. The room was no longer empty. Children sat at desks, dozens of them. They wore clothing from centuries past. They held slates and chalk. They recited in perfect unison. Amo amas amat. Amamus amatis amant. I stood frozen in the doorway. None of the children looked at me. They focused on their lessons. A figure stood at the front of the classroom. a teacher from another age. He gestured as he led the recitation. His mouth moved with each word, but I heard no sound from him. Only the children's voices carried. The children's faces were pale. Their eyes were hollow. They looked exhausted. Some swayed in their seats, but they continued reciting. I stepped into the room. The nearest child turned to look at me. Sores covered his face. The marks of plague. He opened his mouth to continue his recitation. Blood emerged instead of words. It ran down his chin onto his slate. Another child raised her hand. She tried to ask a question. No sound came out. Her throat was too damaged. The plague had stolen her voice, yet she continued trying to speak, desperate to participate in the lesson. The teacher at the front noticed me. He stopped his gestures. All the children fell silent. They turned to stare at me. Dozens of hollow eyes, all filled with desperate need. They wanted acknowledgement. They wanted to prove they had learned. They wanted someone to know they had tried until the very end. I spoke clearly. You did well. You learned your lessons. You can rest now. The teacher smiled. It was a sad, grateful expression. He turned to his students. He made one final gesture, a dismissal. The children stood slowly. They filed toward the door. Each one passed close to me. I felt nothing but cold air. They walked through the doorway and vanished. The teacher was last to leave. He paused beside me. He mouthed words I could not hear, but I understood. Thank you. The room was empty again, silent. I have worked late every night since. I have not heard the voices return. The children have moved on. Their lesson is finally complete. Margaret Sinclair Aberdeen Grammar School, Aberdeenshire, Scotland 6th, December 1715. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Parish records confirmed the 1645 plague outbreak. The school reopened in 1646 after extensive cleaning. A memorial plaque now honours the 50 children who died, noting their dedication to learning even in suffering. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1694T. Classification. Blacksmith statement. Date of statement 14th May 1694. Location Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, Scotland. Author Robert Burns, blacksmith. Statement concerning the possession of my forge. I, Robert Burns, do state that something has claimed my forge. I have worked iron for 35 years. The forge has been in my family for 3 generations. I know every hammer and anvil. I know the sound of proper metalwork. What I hear now is wrong. It began 6 weeks ago. I was working late on a commission, a set of iron gates for the local kirk. I was alone in the forge, or so I thought. I heard someone working at the second anvil, the rhythmic striking of hammer on metal. I looked over. No one was there. The anvil stood empty. Yet the sound continued, regular as a heartbeat. I approached slowly. As I drew near, the hammering stopped. But the anvil was warm, as if someone had just been working there. I returned to my own work. The phantom hammering resumed immediately. This pattern continued throughout the night. When I worked, it worked. When I stopped, it stopped. Always at the second anvil. Always just beyond sight. The following day, I found something strange. A piece of metalwork lay on the anvil. I had not made it. It was beautifully crafted, better than my own skill could produce. But the design was odd, dark and somehow wrong. I showed it to my apprentice. He recoiled from it. He said it felt cursed. I threw it into the scrap pile. The next morning, it was back on the anvil, polished and gleaming. I threw it out again. It returned again. I took it to the priest. He refused to touch it. He said it bore marks of dark craft. He advised me to destroy it. I heated it until it glowed white. I hammered it to pieces. I scattered the fragments. That night, I heard screaming in the forge. Not human screaming. Something else. Rage and pain combined. I ran to investigate. The forge fire burned impossibly high. The flames reached the ceiling, yet nothing caught fire. The heat was intense beyond normal. At the anvil stood a figure. He wore the leather apron of a blacksmith, but his face was twisted in fury. His hands were badly burned. The flesh was blackened and cracked. He raised a hammer. He struck the anvil again and again. Each blow sent sparks flying. The sparks burned where they landed. I smelled my own hair singeing. I backed toward the door. The figure turned to face me. His eyes were coal bright, burning from within. He spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "This forge is mine. I built it. I died in it. I will work it forever." I remembered then my grandfather's tales. A blacksmith who worked here before our family bought the property. He had been obsessed with his craft. He worked day and night. He experimented with dangerous techniques. One night, the forge erupted. The fire consumed him. They found his body fused to the anvil. The metal had melted around him. He and his work had become one. The figure raised his hammer again. "Leave. This is my place. Find another forge." I fled that night. I have not returned. My apprentice tried to retrieve our tools. He found the forge destroyed, every piece of equipment broken, hammers bent, anvils cracked. The fire still burning though no fuel fed it. The building stands empty now. No one will work there. At night, people hear hammering, the steady rhythm of metal striking metal. Smoke rises from the chimney. The forge spirit continues his eternal work. Robert Burns Kilmarnock, Ayrshire, Scotland, 14th May 1694. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Property records confirm a fire at the forge location in 1637. A blacksmith named Andrew Crawford died in the incident. The building was eventually demolished, but residents report hearing hammering sounds from the empty lot. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1761H. Classification Servant's Diary. Date of statement 9th March 1761. Location Colzin Castle, Ayrshire, Scotland. Author Anne Kennedy, Lady's Maid. Diary entry regarding the piper in the caves. I, Anne Kennedy, do record what I heard in the caves beneath Colzin Castle. I serve as lady's maid to the household. My duties sometimes require me to venture to the lower levels. Storage cellars connect to natural caves beneath the castle. The caves extend far, into the cliffside. No one knows how deep they go. Last month, Lady Colzin asked me to retrieve wine from the deep cellar. I took a lantern and descended. The stairs are ancient, cut directly into the rock. They spiral down through increasing darkness. I reached the cellar and found the wine. As I prepared to return, I heard music. Bagpipes playing far below. The sound echoed up from the caves. The tune was unfamiliar, haunting and beautiful. I knew no piper should be in the caves. I called out to announce my presence. The music stopped. Silence pressed in. Then the playing resumed, louder now, closer. I hurried up the stairs. The music followed me. It stayed just behind, never quite catching up, never falling behind. I emerged into the castle proper. The music stopped at the threshold. It would not cross into inhabited space. I reported what I heard to the steward. He seemed troubled but unsurprised. He told me the story of the phantom piper. Centuries ago, a piper was sent into the caves. He was to explore their extent. He played his pipes as he walked. Those above followed his sound. They tracked his progress through the rock. He went deeper and deeper. The pipes grew fainter. Then suddenly, they stopped, mid-tune, as if he had been interrupted. Men searched the caves for days. They found no trace of the piper, no body, no bagpipes, no sign he had ever existed. But sometimes his music returns, playing the same incomplete tune, still wandering the darkness, still trying to complete his journey. I have heard him 3 more times since, always when I descend to the deep cellars, always the same haunting melody, always ending abruptly. Yesterday, I went down for more wine. The music began as expected, but this time, I heard words within the tune, not sung, not spoken, somehow conveyed through the notes themselves. Lost, cannot find the way out. Help me. The message repeated with each verse. I stood at the cellar entrance. I called into the darkness. Follow my voice. Come toward the light. The music changed. The piper adjusted his tune. It became more urgent. The sound grew louder. He was approaching, coming toward my call. I held my lantern high. I continued calling encouragement. The music came closer. I could feel hope in the melody. Then it stopped, abruptly, mid-note, just as it had centuries ago. I waited in the silence. Nothing came. The piper had reached the same barrier again. Whatever stopped him before stops him still. He cannot cross it. He cannot escape. He is trapped in an endless loop, forever walking toward salvation, forever stopped short of reaching it. I hear him regularly now. His tune has changed. The hope is gone. Only despair remains in the notes. He knows he will never emerge. He knows he will play forever in darkness. Yet he continues, because it is all he can do. Anne Kennedy, Colzin Castle, Ayrshire, Scotland, 9th March, 1761. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Castle. Records mention a piper named Malcolm MacLeod, who disappeared while exploring the caves in 1592. The caves have been partially explored, revealing passages extending over 2 miles into the cliffs. Visitors regularly report hearing distant pipe music. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1629D. Classification. Constable's report. Date of statement. 17th October, 1629. Location. Dunfermline Abbey, Fife, Scotland. Author. Constable Andrew Wilson. Report on the figure in the Abbey garden. Why? Constable Andrew Wilson. Do report my encounter in the Abbey garden. I was conducting night patrol through the grounds. The Abbey was quiet and dark. Most residents had retired for the evening. I walked the garden paths as part of my rounds. The moon was bright enough to see clearly. That is when I noticed someone kneeling among the herbs. A monk in traditional robes. His hood was raised. He appeared to be tending the plants. I called out to identify myself. He did not acknowledge me. I approached closer. He continued working. His hands moved among the leaves, pulling weeds, checking growth. The actions of a dedicated gardener. I spoke again, louder this time. Still no response. I came to within 5 paces. I could see him clearly now. His hands passed through the plants, not touching them, moving through them like smoke through air. Yet he continued his gardening motions, unaware that he touched nothing. I reached out to tap his shoulder. My hand encountered no resistance. It passed directly through him. The monk finally reacted. He turned to look at me. His face beneath the hood was partially decayed. Skin hung loose from the bones. One eye was missing. The other stared with terrible intensity. His mouth opened. He tried to speak. No sound emerged. Only the smell of earth and rot. He pointed to the ground where he knelt. I looked down. The earth there was different, darker than the surrounding soil, richer and deeper. I understood then. This monk was buried here, in the garden he had tended in life. The abbey had expanded over the centuries. Old graveyards were sometimes built over. This man lay beneath what was now the herb garden. He did not know he was dead. He still tended his plants, still performed his daily duties, eternal and unchanging. The monk returned to his work. He resumed his phantom gardening. I watched him for several minutes. The dedication was clear even in death. He had loved this garden. He could not abandon it. I reported my encounter to the abbey prior. He consulted ancient records. He found mention of Brother James Mackay, the abbey gardener from 1423. He had died while working his plots. He was buried where he fell, at his own request. He wanted to remain with his plants forever. The prior said, Brother James appears regularly, usually during the growing season, always tending, always caring for gardens that exist only in his memory. The living plants grow where he once planted. Perhaps his ghostly attention helps them thrive. I have patrolled past that garden many times since. I often see him kneeling among the herbs, still working, still dedicated to his calling. Death did not end his service. It merely continued it. He will garden here forever, tending plants he cannot touch, growing food he cannot harvest, but fulfilled in his eternal purpose. Constable Andrew Wilson, Dunfermline. Abbey, 5 Scotland, 17th October 1629. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Brother James Mackay is recorded as dying of natural causes in 1423. He was buried in what is now the South Herb Garden. The plants in that section grow with unusual vigor, despite receiving no special care. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1734R. Classification. Miller's account. Date of statement. 28th February 1734. Location. Needpath Castle, Scottish Borders, Scotland. Author. Thomas Henderson, Miller. Account of the woman at the window 1. Thomas Henderson. Do account for the woman who watches from the castle. I operate the mill near Needpath Castle. My work requires early mornings. I arrive before dawn to begin the day's grinding. From the mill, I have a clear view of the castle tower. 3 months ago, I noticed someone at the upper window, a woman in white. She stood perfectly still, looking out over the river valley. I assumed she was a castle resident, admiring the sunrise, but she appeared every morning, always at the same window, always in the same white dress, always motionless. I mentioned this to the castle steward during a delivery. He seemed disturbed by my report. He said no one resided in that tower. It had been sealed for decades. No one should be able to enter. He invited me to investigate with him. We climbed to the tower room together. The door was locked and bolted. Dust covered the handle. No one had touched it in years. We opened it carefully. The room beyond was empty. Furniture sat draped in sheets. Dust lay thick on every surface. No footprints, no sign of recent occupation. The steward showed me the window where I had seen the woman. The glass was dirty and cobwebbed. No one could have stood there recently, yet I insisted I had seen her. The steward sighed. He told me the story. In 1650, a young woman named Marion lived in the castle. She was the daughter of the local lord. She fell in love with a man her father deemed unsuitable. Her father forbade the match. He locked Marion in this tower. He said she would remain until she forgot her love. Marion refused to relent. She stood at the window every day, watching the road, hoping her love would come for her. Her father kept her imprisoned for a year. Marion wasted away. She ate little. She grew thin and pale, but she never left the window, always watching, always hoping. One day, her love finally came. He rode toward the castle to claim her. Marion saw him from her window. She tried to call out. Her voice was too weak. He could not hear her. Her father's men met him on the road. They drove him away. Marion watched him disappear into the distance. She died that night, still standing at the window, still watching the road. The steward said her spirit never left. She continues her vigil, still hoping he will return, still waiting for rescue that will never come. I see her every morning now. Sometimes she moves. She raises one hand to the glass, as if trying to wave, trying to signal someone on the road below. But the road is always empty. No one rides to save her. Last week, I saw something different. She was not alone at the window. A man stood beside her. He wore traveling clothes from centuries past. He reached for her hand. Their fingers touched. Both figures began to fade, growing translucent, becoming less solid. They turned to face each other. Even from distance, I could see their joy. They had finally found each other. The eternal wait had ended. They faded completely. The window stood empty. For the first time in 300 years, Marion left her post. She finally received her rescue. Just 3 centuries too late. I have not seen her since. The window remains dark and empty. Her vigil is complete. Thomas Henderson, Needpath Castle, Scottish Borders, Scotland. 28th February 1734 archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft Castle. Records confirm Marion Fraser died in the tower in 1651. A man matching her love's description died in a riding accident on the castle road in 1652. Their graves are now beside each other in the castle cemetery. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1787V. Classification. Physician's record. Date of statement. 4th September 1787. Location. Perth Royal Infirmary, Perthshire, Scotland. Author. Dr. William Ross. Physician. Physician's record on patient John Stuart Immerse. Dr. William Ross. Do record the disturbing case of John Stuart. He was admitted 6 days ago with severe distress. His family brought him after a week of escalating behaviour. John is a farmer, age 42. He has always been healthy and rational. His change began suddenly. He was ploughing his field near the old standing stones, an area avoided by most locals. Legend says the stones mark ancient burial grounds. John dismissed such superstition. He needed the field for crops. He began clearing the land around the stones. That night, he woke screaming. He said something was in his room, a figure dressed in ancient garb. It stood at the foot of his bed watching him. His wife saw nothing. The episodes continued nightly. John grew exhausted. He stopped sleeping. He began speaking to invisible presences, having conversations with entities no one else could perceive. His family grew concerned. They brought him here for treatment. I have observed him carefully. His symptoms are consistent with severe exhaustion, but something more troubles him. He claims the figure follows him everywhere. He describes it in precise detail. A warrior in ancient dress, carrying weapons from a forgotten age. The figure never speaks, it only stares. John believes it wants something from him, some form of payment or tribute. He says he violated sacred ground. He disturbed what should have remained hidden. Now the guardian demands recompense. I attempted to calm him with rational explanations. Exhaustion causes hallucinations. Stress creates imaginary threats. John insisted what he saw was real. Yesterday, something changed. John fell completely silent. He stopped responding to questions. He sat motionless for hours, staring at nothing. Then suddenly he spoke, but the voice was not his own. The words emerged in a language I did not recognize. Ancient Celtic, perhaps, or something older still. The tone was angry, accusatory. His body moved in strange ways. Gestures and postures unfamiliar to modern people, as if something was using him, something that existed before our current ways. I called for restraints. It required 4 orderlies to subdue him. His strength was inhuman. He threw grown men aside easily. When we finally secured him, the strange voice continued. It spoke for hours, always in that unknown tongue, always with terrible fury. A scholar from the university came to listen. He identified fragments of the language. Ancient Pictish, a tongue dead for over 1,000 years. The voice spoke of blood debt, of land stolen, of graves desecrated, of warriors who cannot rest while their ground is violated. It demanded John return to the stones. It demanded he make offerings. It demanded he acknowledge the ancient claims. This morning, John woke as himself again. He was weak and confused. He remembered nothing of his possession, but he was adamant about one thing. He will never return to that field. He will leave the standing stones undisturbed. Let the land remain wild. Let the ancient places keep their secrets. Some boundaries should not be crossed. Some ground should not be claimed. Dr. William Ross Perth, Royal Infirmary, Perthshire, Scotland, 4th September, 1787. Archive note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Archaeological surveys near the Perth Standing Stones have revealed extensive Bronze Age burials. The site contains remains of warriors from circa 1200 BCE. Local farmers continue to avoid ploughing near the stones. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1658L. Classification. Ship Captain's Log. Bas. Ovo. Statement. 21st June, 1658. Location. Sound of Mull, Argyll, Scotland. Author. Captain Daniel MacLeod. Log entry regarding the ghost ship. I, Captain Daniel MacLeod, do log our encounter with a vessel that should not exist. I have sailed these waters for 28 years. I know every current and tide. I know the appearance of every ship that plies this route. What we saw yesterday defies all understanding. We were sailing through the Sound of Mull. The weather was clear, visibility excellent. Near noon, the lookout called out. Another ship approached from the north. I took my glass to examine it. The vessel was ancient in design, a galley from centuries past. The style suggested Viking construction, but the Vikings abandoned Scotland long ago. No such ship still sailed. I ordered our course adjusted to avoid collision. The galley maintained its bearing, heading directly for us. I could see figures on its deck, men in ancient armor, carrying weapons from another age. They stood at the rails watching us approach. Their faces were visible even at distance, pale and expressionless, eyes that reflected no light. I called to my crew to prepare for possible conflict, though I could not imagine what ancient warriors wanted. The galley drew closer. I could see every detail now. The wood was blackened with age. The sail was tattered and stained. Yet the ship moved with purpose, cutting through the water smoothly. When 50 yards separated us, I hailed them. I called out in English and Gaelic. No response came. The warriors simply stared. Their mouths hung open, as if frozen mid-cry. The galley passed directly alongside. So close I could have reached across to touch it. I looked down at its deck. The warriors stood in formation, all facing forward. None acknowledged our presence. Then I saw the water around the galley. It did not move naturally. No wake disturbed the surface. The ship left no trace of its passage. It simply glided across the sea, touching nothing, displacing nothing. I looked closer at the warriors. I could see through them, faint but unmistakable. They were transparent, images projected onto reality, shadows of men long dead. The galley passed us completely. It continued south without changing course. I ordered we follow it. My crew was reluctant but obeyed. We pursued for 2 hours. The galley maintained its heading, never slowing, never wavering. Then it entered a bank of fog, mist that had not been visible moments before. We followed into the fog. Visibility dropped to nothing. When we emerged, the galley was gone, simply vanished. We searched for an hour. We found no trace, no wreckage, no debris, nothing to prove it had existed. That evening, I consulted old charts. I found references to Viking raids in these waters. One particular incident from the year 943, a fleet of raiders was caught in a sudden storm. Several ships were driven onto rocks. All hands were lost. The bodies washed ashore over the following weeks. They were buried where they landed, but the ships themselves were never found. Some accounts claimed the vessels still sailed. Ghost ships manned by drowned warriors, forever trying to complete their final voyage, forever unable to reach any shore. I believe we encountered one such ship yesterday, a vessel from over 700 years past, still sailing the waters that claimed it, still crewed by men who refused to acknowledge their deaths. Captain Daniel MacLeod, Sound of Mull, Argyll, Scotland, 21st June 1658. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Multiple ships have reported similar encounters in the Sound of Mull. Norse sagas reference the 943 raid. Maritime records document at least 12 separate sightings of ancient galleys across 4 centuries, always following the same course. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1749S. Classification: Hermit's testimony. Date of statement: 13th August 1749. Location: Loch Ness, Inverness Shire, Scotland. Author: Brother Malcolm Ross. Hermit testimony regarding the loch depths. My brother Malcolm Ross, do testify about what dwells in Loch Ness. I have lived alone on the loch shore for 9 years. I built a small hermitage for prayer and contemplation. The isolation suits my devotions. The loch provides sustenance. I fish for my meals. I know its waters intimately. 3 months ago, something changed. I noticed disturbances on the surface, large movements beneath the water. At first, I assumed they were sturgeon. The loch contains massive fish, but the movements were too large, too deliberate. One morning, I saw it clearly. Something rose from the depths, a shape longer than 3 boats, dark grey and serpentine. It surfaced perhaps 100 yards offshore. I watched through my morning mist. The creature's body curved above the water, multiple humps breaking the surface. The head was horse-like but elongated. The neck stretched impossibly long. Small eyes regarded the shore, regarding me specifically. We held that gaze for several moments. Ancient intelligence looked back at me, something that had seen centuries pass. Then it slipped beneath the surface, disappearing without sound or splash. I questioned my sanity. I prayed for guidance. I wondered if isolation had affected my mind. But I saw it again the next day, and the day after. It appeared regularly, always in the morning, always observing from the same distance, never approaching closer, never showing aggression, simply watching. I began to feel it wanted something, some form of acknowledgement, some recognition of its existence. I called out to it one morning. I blessed it in Latin. I prayed for its soul, if it possessed one. The creature responded. It rose higher from the water. The full length of its neck emerged. It regarded me for a long moment. Then it vocalized, a sound like deep bells underwater, beautiful and haunting. It echoed across the loch. Then the creature submerged. I have not seen it since, but I hear it sometimes. That bell-like call from the depths, usually at dawn or dusk, when the loch is quiet. I believe this creature is ancient, perhaps as old as the loch itself. It has lived here for uncounted centuries, avoiding detection, staying hidden in the cold depths. But it is lonely, isolated beyond human understanding, the last of its kind. It emerged to be seen, to be acknowledged, to know that something else recognized its existence. I gave it that recognition. I witnessed it without fear or judgment. Perhaps that satisfied its need. Perhaps it will remain in the depths now, content to exist unseen, knowing that at least one person believed. Brother Malcolm Ross, Loch Ness, Inverness Shire, Scotland, 13th August, 1749. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Loch Ness has generated hundreds of similar accounts across centuries. St. Columba reportedly encountered a water beast in 565 AD. Geological surveys indicate the loch reaches depths of 755 feet with unexplored underwater cave systems. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1676N. Classification: Prison Chaplain's Record. Date of statement: 10th November 1676. Location: Glasgow Tolbooth Prison, Lanarkshire, Scotland. Author: Father Hugh Campbell, Prison Chaplain. Record of the condemned man's visitor. I, Father Hugh Campbell, do record what visited a prisoner in my care. I serve as chaplain to Glasgow Tolbooth. My duty includes providing spiritual comfort to the condemned. I sit with them during their final days. I pray for their souls before execution. Last week, I attended to prisoner William Grant. He was sentenced to death for murder. He showed no remorse for his crime. He was angry and defiant until the final day. Then something changed. I entered his cell for evening prayers. William sat perfectly still. His defiance had vanished. Terror had replaced it. I asked what troubled him. He pointed to the corner of his cell. "He's here." I saw nothing in the corner. "Who is here, William?" "The man I killed. He has come for me." I tried to calm him. I explained that guilt causes visions. The mind conjures phantoms from conscience. William shook his head. "This is no vision." He stands there watching. He smiles as he waits. I blessed the cell. I prayed for protection. William remained terrified. That night, the guards heard him screaming. They found him cowering against the wall. His eyes were fixed on empty space. He's closer now. He reaches for me. "Father, keep him away." I stayed with William through the night. He never looked away from the corner. He tracked something moving, something I could not see. He described it in detail. The man he had killed, still bearing the wounds William had inflicted. The victim walked slowly toward him, taking hours to cross the small cell. By dawn, William said the spirit stood at his bedside, looking down at him, waiting. William was executed at noon. I walked with him to the gallows. He remained calm until the final moment. Then he screamed, "He is here. He has me now." The hood was placed over his head. The rope was adjusted. In the moment before the trap dropped, I heard William speak again. His voice was muffled by the hood, but the words were clear. "I am sorry. Please forgive me. Please let me go." Then the trap opened. William fell. The rope broke his neck instantly. He did not suffer. But in his final seconds, I saw something. A shadow stood beside the gallows, dark and indistinct. It watched William's body swing. Then it faded, taking something with it. Perhaps William's soul. Perhaps the debt owed for murder. I do not know. I pray William found forgiveness. I pray his victim found peace. But I suspect they are bound together now, forever linked by violence, forever walking the space between this world and the next. Father Hugh Campbell, Glasgow, Tolbooth Prison, Lanarkshire, Scotland, 10th November, 1676. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft prison records confirm William Grant's execution. Guards reported strange sounds from his empty cell for weeks afterward. Two voices arguing in the darkness. The cell was eventually sealed and never used again. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1723C. Classification: Estate Manager's Statement. Date of statement: 7th of July 1723. Location: Fyvie Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland. Author: Robert Gordon, Estate Manager. Statement regarding the Weeping Stones. I, Robert Gordon, do state the phenomenon of the Weeping Stones at Fyvie Castle. I have managed this estate for 14 years. The castle is ancient and full of history. Strange occurrences are not uncommon. But what happens in the North Tower defies explanation. The tower contains a sealed room. No one enters it. The door was bricked over generations ago. According to legend, 3 stones were stolen from the room. Each stone was carved with ancient symbols. The curse says the stones must all be returned. Until then, the castle will weep. I dismissed this as superstition, until I saw the stones weep myself. Water seeps from the walls in the North Tower, not normal moisture. The stones literally cry. Tears of water run down the ancient blocks. They form pools on the floor. The water is ice cold, colder than any natural source. I consulted masons. They examined the tower carefully. No source of water could be found. No pipes, no leaks, no damp course failure. The water simply emerges from solid stone. The phenomenon increases during certain periods. Full moons bring heavier weeping. Anniversaries of past tragedies cause floods. 3 weeks ago, the weeping intensified dramatically. Water poured from the walls. It flowed down the stairs. It filled the lower rooms. We tried to stop it. We sealed cracks. We applied waterproofing. Nothing worked. The water continued. That night, I heard voices, coming from within the sealed room, muffled by brick and stone, but unmistakable. 3 voices, speaking in turn, discussing their fate, lamenting their imprisonment. I pressed my ear to the bricked-up door. The voices became clearer. They spoke in Old Scots, the dialect from centuries past. They described being walled in alive, sealed with the stones they had tried to protect, left to die in darkness. They had guarded the sacred stones. When theft occurred, they were blamed. They were sentenced to death by entombment. Now they weep for their suffering. Now they demand justice. Now they call for the stone's return. The water is their tears. 3 men crying for centuries, unable to rest, unable to forgive. I researched the castle history. Records from 1520 confirm the story. 3 men were sealed in the North Tower. Their crime was losing the sacred stones. Their punishment was slow death. The castle has wept ever since. Yesterday, something extraordinary occurred. A traveller arrived at the castle. He carried an ancient stone, carved with mysterious symbols. He said his family had possessed it for generations. He felt compelled to return it here. We accepted the stone with reverence. That night, the weeping stopped. For the first time in centuries, the walls stayed dry. 2 stones remain missing. When they return, perhaps the voices will cease. Perhaps 3 imprisoned men will finally rest. Until then, the castle will weep. Robert Gordon, Fyvie Castle, Aberdeenshire, Scotland, 7th July 1723. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Fyvie. Castle's weeping stones are documented fact. 1 stone was returned in 1920, a second in 1996. The third remains lost. The North Tower continues to exhibit unexplained moisture despite extensive restoration work. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1548B. Classification Monastery record. Date of statement 15th April 1548. Location Dryburgh Abbey, Scottish Borders, Scotland. Author Prior William Douglas. Record of the chanting monks. Why? Prior William Douglas. Do record the voices that echo through our abbey. The phenomenon began 6 months past. It occurs during the hours of prayer. We gather for Vespers at sunset. As we begin our devotions, other voices join us. They come from the walls themselves. They chant in perfect Latin. The harmonies are beautiful and terrible. At first, I believed brothers in other chambers were singing, but I counted all present in the chapel. Every living monk was accounted for. Yet the additional voices continued, dozens of them, all chanting the ancient prayers. I ordered silence to better hear. Our living voices ceased. The phantom voices continued. They sang the complete Vespers service, every response, every verse, without error or hesitation. I have consulted our archives. I discovered that Dryburgh has stood for 400 years. Thousands of monks have passed through these halls. Hundreds are buried in our grounds. The voices we hear belong to them. They return to sing the prayers they loved in life. They cannot abandon their devotions. Death has not released them from their vows. Last week, I heard my predecessor's voice among them. Prior Edmund passed 3 years ago. I knew his voice well. It rose clearly above the others, leading the responses as he did in life. I called to him by name. The singing stopped immediately. Silence filled the chapel. Then a single voice spoke. Prior Edmund's voice. Nos servira in aeternum. We serve forever. The chanting resumed, all the voices together, a chorus of the dead continuing their eternal worship. I no longer fear this phenomenon. I have come to find it comforting. Our abbey will never truly be empty. Even when all living brothers have gone, the voices will remain, singing their prayers, keeping faith with God, forever and always. Prior William Douglas, Dryburgh Abbey, Scottish Borders, Scotland, 15th April, 1548. Archive note, Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Dryburgh Abbey was severely damaged during the rough wooing in 1544. Despite extensive destruction, visitors continue to report hearing Vespers sung in Latin from the empty ruins. The phenomenon occurs most frequently at sunset. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1691H. Classification. Merchant's Journal. Date of statement. 29th October, 1691. Location. Edinburgh. Old Town, Midlothian, Scotland. Author James Anderson. Cloth merchant. Journal entry of the plague. Dr. I. James Anderson. Do journal my encounter with a figure from the past. My shop is located on the Royal Mile. The building dates back several centuries. It has survived plague, fire, and war. 3 nights ago, I was working late on my accounts. The hour was near midnight. The streets outside were empty and quiet. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy boots on wooden planks. This seemed odd, as I had locked the door. No one should be in the building. I called out to identify the visitor. No answer came. The footsteps continued upward, climbing toward my chamber. I took a candle and went to investigate. A figure stood on the landing. It wore the unmistakable costume of a plague doctor. The long, beaked mask, the dark robes, the wide-brimmed hat, all exactly as depicted in old illustrations. I froze in shock. No plague doctors have walked Edinburgh in over a century. The figure turned to face me. I could see nothing behind the glass eyepieces, just darkness. It raised one gloved hand, pointing at me. Then it pointed toward my shop below. I understood the gesture. It wanted me to follow. Against all reason, I did. The figure descended the stairs. Its movements were strange, too smooth, too gliding, as if floating above the steps. It led me into my shop. It walked directly to the far wall. It pointed at the stones. I saw nothing unusual. The figure repeated the gesture more insistently. Then it faded. Not walked away. Simply ceased to exist. I examined the wall carefully. The stones appeared normal, but I noticed loose mortar between several blocks. I pried at them with a tool. One stone shifted. Behind it lay a hollow space. I removed more stones carefully. A cavity was revealed. Inside lay skeletal remains. 3 bodies, 2 adults and 1 child. They wore rotted clothing from centuries past. I recognized the style. 17th century, the plague years. I understood then. These people had died of plague. Their neighbors had sealed them in the wall. A common practice during outbreaks, preventing the spread of disease, but also preventing proper burial. The plague doctor had shown me these forgotten dead. He still tended his patients, still guided them toward proper rest. Even centuries after his own death, I reported my discovery to the authorities. The remains were given Christian burial. Prayers were said for their souls. That night, I saw the plague doctor once more. He stood outside my shop window. He raised one hand, not pointing this time, a gesture of acknowledgement, perhaps gratitude. Then he walked down the Royal Mile, his form growing fainter with each step. He faded completely before reaching the next corner. I have not seen him since. His task was complete. His patients finally laid to rest. James Anderson, Edinburgh, Old Town, Midlothian, Scotland, 29th. October, 1691. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Edinburgh lost approximately half its population during the 1645 plague outbreak. Hundreds of bodies were sealed in walls and forgotten. Archaeological excavations continue to discover such remains throughout the Old Town. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1773M. Classification Bailiff's Report. Date of statement 12th January 1773. Location Glamis Castle, Angus, Scotland. Author George Stewart. Bailiff. Report on the secret chamber. R. George Stewart. Do report what lies behind the sealed door in Glamis Castle. I have served this household for 9 years. The castle contains many rooms and passages. Some are used daily. Others remain locked. One door in the east wing has always been forbidden. It is sealed with iron bars. Multiple locks secure it. No one is permitted to approach. The family forbids all questions about it. Last month, I was conducting inventory. I passed the forbidden door. I heard sounds from within, scratching, scraping, as if something clawed at the walls. I stopped to listen more carefully. A voice spoke from behind the door, muffled but distinct. "Let me out. Please let me out." The voice sounded ancient, cracked and broken, as if unused for decades. I reported this to Lord Glamis. His reaction was severe. He ordered me never to approach that door again. He said some things must remain sealed. Some secrets must stay buried. But my curiosity was awakened. I researched the castle's history. I found references to a hidden room, a chamber where something was imprisoned. The accounts varied. Some said it held a deformed child, born to the family centuries ago, hidden from the world in shame. Others claimed it contained something worse, something that was not human, something that had been caught and caged. The family fed it through a slot in the door, generation after generation, keeping it alive, keeping it secret, never allowing it to emerge. I could not stop thinking about that voice, the desperate plea for release. I returned to the door 3 nights ago. I brought tools. I intended to look inside. Just one glimpse. I removed one of the locks. The mechanism was ancient but functioning. I began work on the second lock. A hand fell on my shoulder. Lord Glamis stood behind me. His face was terrible in its fury. "You do not understand what you risk." That door must never open. What lies within must never escape. He dragged me from the corridor. He dismissed me from service immediately. As I left the castle, I looked back at the east wing. I saw a light in one window, a window that should not exist. It did not match any room I knew. It must open into the secret chamber. A figure appeared in that window, pressing against the glass. Its shape was wrong, too tall, too thin, too angular. It saw me looking. It raised one elongated hand. It pressed it against the window. The fingers were too long, too many joints. Then Lord Glamis appeared at my side. Now you understand. Now you know why it must remain sealed. Tell no one what you have seen, for everyone's sake. I fled Glamis that day. I have not returned, but I see that figure in my dreams, pressed against the glass, begging for release. Whatever is in that room has been there for generations. It will remain there for generations more. Some doors should never be opened. George Stewart, Glamis Castle, Angus, Scotland, 12th January, 1773. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Glamis Castle's secret chamber remains one of Scotland's most enduring mysteries. Each Earl of Glamis learns the secret upon inheriting the title. None have ever revealed its contents. The sealed door exists in castle records, but its location changes in accounts. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1636Q. Classification. Nun's Diary. Date of statement. 8th June, 1636. Location. Iona Convent, Inner Hebrides, Scotland. Author, Sister Agnes MacDonald. Diary entry. Regarding the Latin speaker. I, Sister Agnes MacDonald, do record the possession of Sister Catherine Ross. Sister Catherine joined our convent 8 months ago. She was devout and cheerful. She sang beautifully during services. Her transformation began without warning. We were at morning prayers. Sister Catherine suddenly stood. She began speaking in Latin, fluent and rapid Latin. Sister Catherine knew no Latin. She had received no classical education, yet she spoke as if born to the language. Ego sum qui fui ante Christum. I am one who was before Christ. The words chilled us all. Mother Superior ordered her to silence. Sister Catherine laughed. The sound was not her own, deep and mocking. Silentium non est pro immortales. Silence is not for immortals. We attempted to restrain her. She threw us aside with inhuman strength. 3 sisters could not hold her. She walked to the altar. She spoke continuously in Latin, describing ancient rituals, practices from before Christianity came to these islands, blood offerings, human sacrifices, dark worship of elder things. Hic locus erat noster primum. This place was ours first. We called for the priest from the mainland. He attempted exorcism. The entity laughed at his prayers. Vestri Deus est infans. Your God is an infant. Nos eramus ante omnia. We were before all things. The possession lasted 3 days. Sister Catherine did not eat, did not sleep, did not stop speaking Latin. Her voice grew hoarse. Blood appeared on her lips. Still the words poured forth. The priest continued his prayers. Other sisters joined him. We prayed without ceasing. On the 3rd day, something changed. Sister Catherine fell silent, mid-word. She stood motionless for an hour. Then she collapsed. We carried her to the infirmary. She slept for 2 full days. When she woke, she was herself again. She remembered nothing. She asked why her throat hurt, why we looked so frightened. We told her she had been ill. We did not mention the possession. Some things are too terrible to share. But Sister Catherine is changed. Sometimes I see her staring at nothing. Her lips move silently. I fear she mouths Latin words. I fear the entity has not truly left. It merely waits, hiding inside her, biding its time. Sister Agnes MacDonald, Iona Convent, Inner Hebrides, Scotland, 8th June, 1636. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Iona was a sacred site for pre-Christian Druids before St. Columba established his monastery in 563 AD. Archaeological evidence suggests continuous spiritual activity for over 3,000 years. Sister Catherine remained in the convent but never fully recovered. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1752. F classification. Architect's notes. Date of statement. 3rd March, 1752. Location. Holyrood Palace, Edinburgh, Midlothian, Scotland. Author, William Adam, architect. Notes on the phantom musicians. I, William Adam. Do note the music that plays in the palace. I am conducting renovations at Holyrood. The work requires presence at all hours. I often remain in the building after dark. That is when the music begins. It comes from the state apartments. The sound of a full court orchestra. Violins, harpsichord, flutes, and more. Playing pieces from a century past. The first time I heard it, I assumed rehearsals were ongoing. I went to investigate. The apartments were empty, yet the music continued. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I walked through each chamber. The sound followed me, always just beyond the next door, always in the room I had just left. I consulted the palace staff. They were unsurprised by my account. They said the ghost musicians have played for decades. Always the same pieces, always in perfect harmony. They perform for an audience that no longer exists. The music is connected to Queen Mary. She loved music and dancing. Her court was renowned for its entertainment. After her forced abdication, the music stopped. The palace fell silent, but the musicians never left. They continue playing for their queen, though she departed centuries ago. Last night, I remained late to finish drawings. Near midnight, the music began. I set down my work and listened. The piece was a galliard, popular in Mary's time. The music grew louder, more instruments joined. I heard footsteps in the chamber above, not walking, dancing, the rhythmic pattern of formal court dance. I climbed the stairs quietly. The dancing sounds came from the throne room. I pressed my ear to the door. I heard laughter, conversation in French and Scots, the rustle of fine gowns. I opened the door slowly. The room was empty. Moonlight fell through the tall windows. Dust motes danced in the silver light, but I heard the sounds clearly. A full court gathering. Musicians playing, dancers moving, voices calling out steps. I stepped into the room. The sound stopped. Complete silence fell, but the air felt charged, as if dozens of people held their breath, watching me, waiting for me to leave. I spoke into the silence. I mean, no disrespect. Please continue. After a moment, the music resumed, softer this time, almost cautious. The dancing sounds returned. I stood against the wall. I watched the empty room, but in my mind, I saw them. The ghostly court, ladies in elaborate gowns, Gentlemen in fine doublets, all moving through the formal patterns, all serving their absent queen. The vision lasted perhaps 10 minutes. Then it faded. The music diminished. The room fell silent again. I returned to my work, but I understand now. Holyrood was never abandoned. The court never truly ended. It simply moved beyond our sight, forever entertaining, forever celebrating, forever waiting for Mary to return. William Adam Holyrood Palace, Edinburgh, Midlothian, Scotland, 3rd March, 1752. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Mary, Queen of Scots, resided at Holyrood from 1561 to 1567. The palace hosted numerous celebrations and gatherings. Visitors and staff continued to report phantom music, particularly in chambers associated with Mary's court. The phenomenon occurs most frequently on anniversary dates. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA 1685T. Classification: Farmer's account. Date of statement: 21st September 1685. Location: Culloden Moor, Inverness-shire, Scotland. Author: Duncan Mackintosh. Farmer. Account of the soldiers on the moor. I, Duncan Mackintosh, do account for what I witnessed on Culloden Moor. My farm borders the moorland. I walk these fields daily. I know every stone and hollow. But 3 nights ago, I saw something impossible. I was returning home near dusk. A mist had rolled in from the firth, thick and grey. I walked carefully through the reduced visibility. Then I heard sounds ahead. Men shouting, metal clashing, the unmistakable noise of battle. I stopped, confused. No battles occur here. We are at peace. Yet the sounds continued, growing louder. I moved forward cautiously. The mist began to glow. A strange red light suffused it, like firelight reflected through smoke. Then I saw them. Soldiers fighting, hundreds of them. They wore uniforms from another era, some in red coats, others in Highland dress. They clashed with terrible ferocity, swords and bayonets flashing, men falling, screaming, dying. I stood frozen, unable to look away. The battle raged around me. Soldiers ran past on all sides, yet none acknowledged my presence. They seemed unaware of me. I was a ghost in their world, or they were ghosts in mine. The fighting was terrible. The Highland warriors were overwhelmed. They fell in great numbers, cut down by musket fire and bayonet. Their cries were heartbreaking, calling to each other in Gaelic, encouraging, pleading, despairing. The red-coated soldiers advanced, methodical and merciless. They gave no quarter. The wounded were finished where they lay. The moor became a slaughter ground. I watched in horror as the Highlanders broke. They retreated across the field, pursued by their enemies. More fell with each step. Then, as suddenly as it began, the vision ended. The mist cleared. The sound stopped. Silence returned to the moor. I stood alone in the fading light. No soldiers, no bodies, no blood on the heather. Just empty moorland. But the grass beneath my feet felt wrong, soft and yielding, as if soil had been recently disturbed, as if many men had fallen here. I hurried home. I told my wife what I had witnessed. She was troubled but not surprised. She said others have seen similar visions. The moor replays its history, showing those who witnessed the terrible events that occurred. But no battle has been fought here in our lifetime. The moorland is peaceful, yet I know what I saw. I know what happened on this ground. Some great tragedy, some slaughter that stained the earth. The land remembers. Even if we have forgotten, the land replays its trauma, again and again, forever showing the death of those who fell. Duncan McIntosh Culloden Moor, Inverness Shire, Scotland, 21st September 1685. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Mackintosh, described the Battle of Culloden 61 years before it occurred in 1746. His account matches the historical battle precisely. Similar precognitive visions of the battle have been reported across centuries. The moor continues to replay its future tragedy. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1704 W. Classification: Constable's Report. Date of statement: 16th November 1704. Location: Hermitage Castle, Scottish Borders, Scotland. Author: Constable Thomas Murray. Report on the screaming from the dungeon. Constable Thomas Murray. Do report the sounds from Hermitage Castle dungeon. The castle has stood for over 400 years. It has witnessed countless horrors: battles, sieges, torture, and murder. Its walls have absorbed centuries of suffering. That suffering echoes still. I was investigating reports of disturbances. Local residents complained of screaming coming from the castle at night, terrible screaming that lasted for hours. I visited during daylight first. The castle was silent, empty and cold, but the dungeon was worse. The air felt heavy with despair. The stones seemed to hold darkness. I decided to spend a night there, to verify the reports. I positioned myself in the main hall, with a lantern and weapons. Darkness fell slowly. The castle grew colder with each hour. Near midnight, I heard the first sound, a moan from deep below, from the dungeon depths. I descended the stone stairs carefully. The moaning grew louder. It became a wail, then a full scream. The sound was inhuman, pure agony-given voice. It echoed through the passages, multiplying, overlapping, as if many throats screamed together. I reached the dungeon level. The cells were empty, yet the screaming continued, all around me, from every direction. I covered my ears. The sound penetrated regardless. It seemed to come from inside my own skull. Then I saw them. Figures in the cells, transparent and wavering. Prisoners from across the centuries, all suffering, all trapped, all screaming their torment. One figure pressed against the bars. Its face was twisted in agony. It reached toward me. Its mouth opened impossibly wide. The scream that emerged shook the stones. Other figures appeared, filling every cell, some chained to walls, some stretched on racks, some in cages too small to stand, all screaming, all begging, all reliving their final agonies. I fled up the stairs. The screaming followed. It filled the castle. Every chamber, every passage, the entire structure vibrated with the sound. I burst out into the courtyard. The screaming stopped at the threshold. It could not cross into open air. It remained trapped within the walls, just as the prisoners had been trapped. I spent the rest of the night outside. At dawn, I examined the castle again, silent and empty, the horror confined to darkness. But I found scratches on the dungeon walls, words carved by desperate fingers. Help us. Remember us. We suffer still. Hermitage Castle holds its dead. They cannot escape. They cannot rest. They replay their torments endlessly. The castle is their prison. Death brought no release, only eternal repetition. Constable Thomas Murray, Hermitage Castle, Scottish Borders, Scotland, 16th November 1704. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Hermitage Castle served as a brutal prison for centuries. Records document numerous deaths from torture and starvation. The screaming phenomenon is well documented, occurring nightly regardless of season or weather. The castle remains one of Scotland's most actively haunted sites. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1642V. Classification. Seamstress's testimony. Date of statement 25th May 1642. Location Linlithgow Palace, West Lothian, Scotland. Author Mary Ferguson, Royal Seamstress Testimony regarding the woman in blue. I, Mary Ferguson, do testify about the woman who walks the palace. I serve as seamstress to the royal household. My work requires me to move through all palace chambers. I know every corridor and room. 6 months ago, I began seeing her. A woman in a blue gown. She appears in doorways. She stands in passages. She never speaks. She simply watches. Her dress is from another era. Decades passed by the style. Rich fabric and fine embroidery. The clothing of nobility. But her face is troubled. Sad beyond measure. As if bearing unbearable grief. I first saw her in the Queen's chambers. I was alone, working on repairs. I looked up, and she stood by the window, gazing out toward the loch. I asked if she required assistance. She did not respond. She did not even acknowledge my presence. I approached her. As I drew near, she faded, not walked away, simply became less solid, less real, until she vanished completely. I have seen her 20 times since, always in the same areas, the Queen's chambers, the Great Hall, the chapel. She appears to follow a pattern, a route she walked in life, now walks in death. Other servants have seen her too. An older maid identified her. She recognized the blue gown. She said it belonged to Queen Margaret, wife of King James IV. Margaret died in this palace in 1541, just 1 year ago. She had lived here after her husband's death, after losing him at Flodden Field. She spent 30 years in mourning, walking these halls, gazing from windows, waiting for news that never came. The older maid said Margaret never recovered. She wore blue in constant mourning. She refused to remarry happily. She existed in perpetual grief. Last week, I saw her in the chapel. She knelt before the altar. Her head was bowed in prayer. I could see her lips moving, though no sound emerged. I knelt nearby quietly. I prayed with her. After several minutes, she turned to look at me. For the first time, she acknowledged my presence. Tears ran down her face. She opened her mouth. A whisper emerged, so faint I barely heard. He never came home. I waited, but he never came home. I understood. She still mourned James, still waited for his return, even in death. He is with God now, I said gently. You will see him again. She smiled, a sad, broken smile. Then she faded. I have not seen her since. Perhaps my words brought comfort. Perhaps she finally accepted his death. Perhaps she has moved on to join him. Or perhaps she simply walks different halls now, in a palace beyond our sight. Still waiting, still mourning, still wearing her blue gown of grief. Mary Ferguson, Linlithgow Palace, West Lothian, Scotland, 25th May, 1642. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Margaret Tudor died at Methven Castle in 1541, but spent her final years at Linlithgow. The Blue Lady remains one of the palace's most frequently reported apparitions. She appears most often on the anniversary of the Battle of Flodden. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA 1786D. Classification. Shepherd's Statement. Date of statement: 7th December 1786. Location: Schiehallion Mountain, Perthshire, Scotland. Author: Angus Campbell. Shepherd's Statement. Concerning the mountain lights, I, Angus Campbell, do state what I witnessed on Schiehallion. I have tended sheep on these slopes for 20 years. I know this mountain better than any living man, its moods and dangers, its paths and shelters, but I have never seen what appeared last month. I was checking my flock near the summit. Dusk was approaching. I prepared to descend before darkness fell. Then I saw lights on the mountainside, multiple points of illumination, moving in formation, ascending toward the peak. I called out, warning whoever climbed that night was dangerous. No response came. The lights continued upward. They moved faster than any human could climb, gliding over rocks and slopes, never slowing, never stopping. I watched from a distance. The lights reached the summit. They formed a circle, perfect and precise. Then they began to pulse, growing brighter, then dimmer, in synchronized rhythm. The pattern was deliberate, not natural, not accidental. Something intelligent controlled them. I climbed higher to observe better. As I approached the summit, I heard sounds. Chanting, multiple voices speaking in unison. The language was unknown to me, not Gaelic, not English. Something older, something that predated both. The lights pulsed faster. The chanting grew louder. I crept to the edge of the circle. I saw figures within the lights, tall and robed. Their faces were hidden. They stood around a central stone, a natural formation that has always been there, but now it glowed with inner light. The figures raised their hands. They spoke together. Their voices created harmonics, sounds that should not be possible from human throats. The stone responded. It pulsed with each syllable, as if the rock itself understood, as if it participated in their ritual. One figure turned toward me. Though I could not see its face, I felt its gaze. It gestured, not threatening, beckoning, inviting me to join. Terror seized me. I fled down the mountain. The chanting followed, growing fainter with distance, but never fully fading. Even when I reached the valley, I heard echoes. I told no one initially. Who would believe such a tale? But the lights have appeared 3 more times, always during the new moon, always following the same pattern. Last night, I watched from the valley. The lights performed their ritual. When they finished, they descended. Not down the mountain, into it. They moved straight toward the stone. They passed through solid rock, disappearing into the earth. The mountain swallowed them. I understand now. Schiehallion is hollow, or contains passages unknown to us. The lights are guardians, or worshippers, or perhaps the mountain itself has consciousness, and the lights are its thoughts made visible. I will not climb at night again. Some mysteries are better left unwitnessed. Some secrets belong to the mountain alone. Angus Campbell, Schiehallion Mountain, Perthshire, Scotland. 7th December 1786. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Schiehallion, has been considered sacred since prehistoric times. The mountain's unusual geology made it famous in physics experiments. Local folklore describes fairy lights and spirit gatherings at the summit for centuries. Campbell's account is one of many similar reports. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1679L classification. Physician's notes. Date of statement. 18th August 1679. Location: Stirling Town Hospital, Stirlingshire, Scotland. Author: Dr. Robert Lindsay, physician. Physician's notes on the speaking corpse. I, Dr. Robert Lindsay, do note the most disturbing case of my career. A body was brought to the hospital 3 days ago. A man found dead in his home. No signs of violence. Natural causes, it appeared. He was identified as Malcolm Grant, age 63, a merchant of good reputation. I was preparing the body for burial. Standard procedures, documentation and cleaning. As I worked, the corpse spoke. I am a rational man, a man of science, but I heard words emerge from a dead throat. Nolo mori, Latin. I do not want to die. I stepped back in shock. The body lay motionless, eyes closed. No breathing, no pulse. Completely dead by all measures. Yet the voice came again. Auxilium. Help. I called for assistance. 2 other physicians came. We examined the body together. We confirmed death. No heartbeat, no respiration. Skin growing cold. Rigor mortis beginning. Then it spoke again. All 3 of us heard it clearly. Ego aduk sum hic. I am still here. We attempted to understand this phenomenon. Was some air trapped in the lungs? Could gases cause sounds resembling speech? But the words were too clear, too deliberate, too responsive to our presence. The voice spoke directly to us, answering our unspoken questions. Corpus mortuum est. The body is dead. Ego non sum. I am not. We tried to communicate. We asked questions in Latin. The voice responded. It claimed to be Malcolm Grant's consciousness, trapped, unable to leave, unable to accept death. Non possum aere. I cannot go. Nimis timeo. I am too afraid. For 2 days, the voice continued, growing weaker, growing fainter, but persistent. Malcolm's consciousness clung to his corpse, refusing to release, terrified of what came next. We tried to help. We brought a priest. He prayed over the body. He offered comfort. He described God's mercy. The voice wept. Actual tears emerged from closed eyes, rolling down dead cheeks. Peccata mea sunt magna. My sins are great. Non sum dignus. I am not worthy. The priest assured him of forgiveness, of God's infinite love, of welcome awaiting all souls. Yesterday, the voice finally changed. The fear began to fade. Video lucem. I see light. Espulsera. It is beautiful. Venit aliquis. Someone comes. Then silence, complete and final. We waited for hours. No. More words emerged. Malcolm Grant had finally let go. His consciousness had moved on, leaving only the empty vessel behind. We buried him this morning. The priest performed a beautiful service, but I cannot stop thinking. How many dead linger? How many consciousness remain trapped, too afraid to move on, too attached to release? Do they all speak? Or do most suffer in silence? Dr. Robert Lindsay Sterling, Town Hospital, Stirlingshire, Scotland, 18th August 1679. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, medical literature contains similar accounts across centuries. The phenomenon is called consciousness persistence. Neurological science cannot explain how awareness continues after brain death. Grant's case remains among the most documented examples. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1731P. Classification Innkeeper's Report. Date of statement 9th February 1731. Location The Cross Keys Inn, Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Scotland. Author William Douglas, innkeeper. Report on the perpetual card game. I, William Douglas, do report the strange occurrence in the inn's back room. I have operated the Cross Keys for 18 years. The inn is popular with merchants and travellers. We host many gatherings and meetings. 6 months ago, I rented the back room to 4 gentlemen. They requested privacy for their card game. I provided wine and candles. I left them to their entertainment. The game began at 8 o'clock. At midnight, I checked on them. They waved me away, still playing, still engaged. At 2 in the morning, I heard voices, angry voices. An argument was developing. I entered to ensure order. The 4 men sat around the table. Cards spread before them. Wine glasses empty. But something was wrong. Their movements were too slow, too deliberate, like watching figures underwater. I spoke to them. None acknowledged me. They continued playing. Their faces showed intense concentration. And something else. Fear. Deep, terrible fear. I looked at the cards on the table. The suits were wrong. Not hearts, diamonds, clubs, and spades. Strange symbols I did not recognize. Images that hurt to look at. Patterns that seemed to shift and move. One gentleman reached for a card. His hand was translucent. I could see through his flesh. I stepped back in alarm. All 4 men were becoming transparent, fading slowly, yet still playing, still focused on their game. I called for help. My wife and serving boy came running. They saw what I saw, 4 ghostly figures playing cards, growing less substantial with each moment. One man tried to stand, the others grabbed his arms, pulling him back, forcing him to continue. He looked terrified. He mouthed words we could not hear. "Help me. Let me leave. Please." But the others held him fast. The game continued. By dawn, they had faded completely. The room stood empty. The cards remained on the table. But when I tried to pick them up, they turned to dust, crumbling at my touch. Since that night, the phenomena repeats. Every evening at 8 o'clock, 4 figures appear in the room. They sit at the table. They shuffle spectral cards. They play through the night. At dawn, they fade, only to return the next evening. I learned the room's history. 20 years ago, 4 merchants played cards here. A dispute arose over the game. One man was accused of cheating. An argument became a fight. One man drew a knife. In the struggle, all 4 were killed. They died at that table, still clutching their cards, still arguing over the game. Now they play eternally, trapped in that final moment, unable to finish, unable to leave, unable to rest. I have sealed the room, but I hear them every night. The shuffle of cards, the clink of glasses, the murmur of voices, forever gambling, forever arguing, forever dying. William Douglas, The Cross Keys Inn, Glasgow, Lanarkshire, Scotland, 9th February 1731. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Glasgow, records confirm 4 merchants died at the Cross Keys in 1711. The incident was ruled mutual combat. The back room has been sealed for over 2 centuries. Current owners report card-playing sounds continue nightly. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1624K. Classification. Church Warden's Testimony. Date of statement, 24th October 1624. Location, St Magnus Cathedral, Orkney, Scotland. Author, David Sinclair, Church Warden Testimony regarding the Singing Skull. I, David Sinclair, do testify about the relic in our cathedral. The skull has been here for over 400 years. It belonged to St Magnus himself. The cathedral was built to house it. The relic is displayed in a golden reliquary. Pilgrims come from across Scotland to see it, to pray before it, to seek its blessing. 3 months ago, the skull began singing. I was alone in the cathedral at dawn. Preparing for morning services, a sound emerged from the reliquary. A single voice singing in Latin, clear and beautiful. The hymn was ancient. From the earliest days of Christianity in these islands. I approached the reliquary slowly. The singing continued, growing louder as I drew near. I opened the golden case. The skull sat on its velvet cushion. The jaw moved, opening and closing in rhythm with the song. Though no throat existed, though no lungs drew breath, the skull sang. I fell to my knees. This was a miracle, or a warning, or something beyond understanding. The singing lasted 10 minutes, then stopped mid-verse. The jaw fell still. Silence returned. I reported this to Bishop Malcolm. He was skeptical, but curious. He examined the skull himself. He found no mechanism, no trick, just ancient bone. But that night, the singing resumed. We both heard it. The bishop and I. The skull sang the Vespers hymn. Perfect Latin pronunciation, perfect pitch and rhythm. This time, the bishop joined the song. He sang with the skull. 2 voices in harmony, the living and the dead. When the hymn ended, the skull spoke, not singing, speaking, 1 word. Gratias. Thanks. The bishop wept. He understood. St. Magnus was grateful. Grateful his shrine still stood. Grateful believers still came. Grateful his sacrifice was remembered. The skull has sung many times since, always at dawn or dusk, always the old hymns. Sometimes priests join the singing, creating unearthly harmonies, the living and the dead praising together. Pilgrims come specifically to hear it now. Word is spread. The singing skull of St. Magnus, proof of miracles, proof of life beyond death, proof that saints truly intercede. Not everyone hears it. The skull chooses its audience. Those pure of heart hear clearly. Others hear nothing. I am blessed to be among the chosen, to sing with a saint, to join my voice with one who has been dead for centuries. David Sinclair, St. Magnus Cathedral, Orkney, Scotland, 24th October, 1624. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. St. Magnus, Erlandson, was martyred in 1117. His skull, showing the axe wound that killed him, is preserved in the cathedral. Multiple witnesses have reported singing phenomena across 4 centuries. Scientific analysis offers no explanation. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file. NOA1768R classification. Soldier's letter. Date of statement. 1st May 1768. Location: Edinburgh Castle, Midlothian, Scotland. Author: Lieutenant James Stewart. Garrison Officer. Letter describing the Phantom Piper. Lieutenant James Stewart. Do describe the piper who walks the castle walls. I am stationed at Edinburgh Castle. My duties include night watch. I patrol the battlements and courtyards. 2 weeks ago, I heard bagpipes at midnight. The sound came from the ramparts. A single piper playing a lament. The melody was achingly sad. I went to investigate. No piper stood on the walls, yet the music continued, moving along the battlements, always ahead of me, always out of sight. I called to my fellow guards. They heard it too. We followed the sound together. It led us around the entire perimeter, then stopped at the main gate. The music faded into silence. We searched thoroughly. No piper, no bagpipes, no explanation. The sergeant told us the story. Centuries ago, tunnels were discovered beneath the castle. They extended deep into the rock. No one knew where they led. A piper volunteered to explore. He would play as he walked. Those above would track his progress. He descended into the tunnels. His pipes could be heard clearly. He played as he walked beneath the Royal Mile, his music marking his route. Halfway down the mile, the music stopped, abruptly, mid-tune. Men rushed to excavate. They searched for days. No trace of the piper was found. He had vanished in the darkness. Since then, his music returns, playing the route he walked, the journey he never completed. I have heard him 5 times now, always at midnight, always the same lament, always following the same path. Last night was different. I heard the music begin. I stood still and listened. The piper approached my position. The music grew louder. I saw him. He wore the tartan of the old Highland regiments. His pipes were at his lips. His fingers worked the chanter, but I could see through him. He was transparent, a shadow of a man. He walked past me, so close I could have touched him. He never acknowledged me. His eyes stared ahead, focused on something I could not see. His destination, the end of his journey, the place he never reached. He continued along the wall, his music fading with distance. At the gate, he stopped. He lowered his pipes. He turned and looked back, toward the tunnel entrance, toward his starting point. Then he vanished. The music ended. Silence reclaimed the night. I understand now. He walks the route above ground, the route he should have completed below. He plays the tune that marked his path. He continues his mission, forever exploring, forever piping, forever lost in darkness. Lieutenant James Stewart, Edinburgh Castle, Midlothian, Scotland. 1st May 1768. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. The Lost Piper is one of Edinburgh's most famous ghost stories. The tunnels exist beneath the Royal Mile, though most are now sealed. Piper music is regularly reported by castle guards and visitors. The phenomenon occurs most frequently in May. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1651H. Classification: Librarian's account. Date of statement: 13th March 1651. Location: University of St Andrews, Fife, Scotland. Author: Thomas Mitchell, University Librarian. Account of the moving books. Thomas Mitchell, do account for the phenomenon in our library. I have served as librarian for 22 years. I know every volume in our collection. I know precisely where each belongs. Yet books move on their own. I first noticed 6 months ago. I would shelve texts in proper order. The next morning, they would be rearranged, not randomly, but deliberately, organized by different criteria, sometimes by publication date, sometimes by author's birthplace, sometimes by subject matter. The arrangements were logical, just not my system. I thought perhaps students were studying overnight, but the library was locked. I kept the only key. I began leaving markers, threads across doorways, dust on handles. All remained undisturbed, yet the book still moved. I decided to watch all night, to catch whoever entered. I hid among the stacks with a lantern. Near midnight, I heard movement, the sound of books sliding, pages turning. I peered around the shelf. Books floated through the air, dozens of them, moving independently. They pulled themselves from shelves. They opened their own covers. They turned their own pages, as if invisible hands worked them, or as if they moved by their own will. The books formed into groups, related volumes gathered together, theological texts in one area, scientific treatises in another, historical chronicles in a third. The organization was brilliant, better than my own system, more intuitive and accessible. I watched in amazement for an hour. The books worked with purpose. They seemed to know exactly where they belonged. Finally, I spoke. "Who does this?" The books stopped moving. They hung suspended in the air. Then one book flew toward me. It opened to a specific page. The text was a dedication to John Fletcher, whose love of knowledge exceeded all. John Fletcher. I knew the name. He had been librarian here a century ago. He died at his desk, found one morning slumped over an open book. He had devoted his life to organizing our collection, creating the perfect system, a system lost when he died. I understood then. John Fletcher had never left. He continued his work, organizing, cataloging, perfecting the library he loved. I spoke to the empty air. "Your system is beautiful. Would you teach it to me?" Books began moving again, faster now, enthusiastically, showing me the logic, the connections, the perfect order. Since that night, I work with John Fletcher. I organize as he directs. Books move to guide me, opening to relevant passages, highlighting connections. Together we maintain the library, the living and the dead, both serving knowledge, both devoted to learning. Students comment on how well organized we are, how easy it is to find what they need. They do not know they have two librarians, one visible, one invisible, both working for their benefit. Thomas Mitchell, University of St Andrews, Fife, Scotland. 13th March, 1651. Archive note. Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. John Fletcher served as librarian from 1539 to 1551. His organizational innovations were considered revolutionary. Modern librarians at St Andrews report books occasionally returning themselves to optimal locations. The phenomenon continues to this day. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1793T. Classification. Midwife statement. Date of statement 22nd November 1793. Location. Cawdor. Castle, Nairn, Scotland. Author Agnes MacLeod. Midwife statement concerning the crying child. I, Agnes MacLeod, do state what I heard in Cawdor Castle. I was attending Lady Cawdor during her confinement. She was near her time. I remained in the castle to be available. 3 nights before the birth, I heard crying. A child, crying. The sound came from the walls, distant but unmistakable. I assumed a child in the household was distressed, but Lady Corder had no other children. No youngsters lived in the castle. I followed the sound through corridors. It seemed to come from everywhere. One moment ahead, the next moment behind, always moving, always crying. I asked the servants. They were not surprised. They said the crying child had walked these halls for centuries. No one knew who it was, or why it cried. It simply existed, a permanent resident, forever weeping. That night, the crying grew louder, more insistent, more desperate. It seemed to be searching for something, or someone. Lady Corder went into labour. As her pains increased, the crying intensified, as if responding to her distress. The birth was difficult. Lady Corder suffered greatly. The crying child seemed to suffer with her. Its wails matched her own. Finally, the baby was born. A healthy boy, strong lungs and healthy colour. As I cut the cord, the phantom crying stopped. Complete silence fell. For the first time in memory, the castle was quiet. Lady Corder held her son. She looked around in wonder. The crying has stopped. I confirmed what she sensed. The phantom child had fallen silent. Over the following days I learned more. Centuries ago, a child died at birth here. The mother died as well. The father, grief-stricken, locked the nursery. He forbade anyone to enter. He could not bear to see it. The child was buried in unconsecrated ground. Illegitimate, according to some accounts. Denied both mother and blessing. It cried for what it never had, for the love it never received, for the life it never lived. But when Lady Corder's son was born, something changed. Perhaps the phantom found peace in seeing new life. Perhaps it felt less alone. Perhaps it finally understood it could rest. The crying has not returned. The castle remains silent. Lady Corder says sometimes she sees a shadow in the nursery, small and child-sized, watching over her son, protecting him, loving him. The phantom found its purpose. It guards the living child, doing in death what it could not do in life. Agnes MacLeod Corder, Castle, Nairn, Scotland, 22nd November, 1793. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft, Cawdor Castle's phantom child, was reported for over 300 years. After Agnes MacLeod's account, crying sounds ceased. However, multiple nannies and governesses reported feeling a protective presence in the nursery, particularly when children were ill. End of file. Proceeding to next recovered document. Case file NOA1615S. Classification: Monk's Final Testament. Date of statement: 30th December 1615. Location: Crossraguel Abbey, Ayrshire, Scotland. Author: Brother Kenneth Mackay. Final Testament of Brother Kenneth Mackay vs. Brother Kenneth Mackay. Do write this as my final testament. I, dying. The physician says I have perhaps one day remaining, but I must record what I have experienced. I must warn those who come after. 3 months ago, I was organizing the Abbey crypt. Ancient documents needed cataloguing. I found a sealed chamber, hidden behind a false wall. The stones had been mortared over, deliberately concealed. Curiosity overcame my better judgment. I opened the wall. The chamber beyond was small. No windows, no other exits, just 4 walls and a dirt floor. In the center stood a stone pedestal. Upon it rested a book, bound in leather, covered in strange markings. I opened the book. The text was Latin, but wrong somehow. The words were familiar, but their meanings were twisted. Prayers written backward, blessings turned to curses, holy names inverted. I read one passage aloud, attempting to understand. As the words left my lips, something changed. The air grew heavy. The temperature dropped. I felt a presence enter the chamber. Something had been waiting, trapped in that sealed room, bound by the very book I had read from. My words had released it. Since that moment, I have not been alone. Something follows me, something invisible, but present. I feel it behind me constantly, watching, waiting. It speaks to me in dreams, in that twisted Latin from the book. It tells me it has claimed me. I am its vessel now, its anchor to this world. I have tried to fight it. I have prayed ceaselessly. I have fasted until I could barely stand. Nothing weakens its grip. It grows stronger. I grow weaker. My brothers say I have fallen ill. They do not understand. This is not illness. This is possession. This is invasion. Last night, I lost time. I woke in the sealed chamber, standing before the pedestal, the book open in my hands, reading the twisted prayers, strengthening the entity, feeding it with holy words corrupted. I sealed the chamber again. I marked the wall with warnings. I wrote in Latin and Scots and Gaelic, "Do not open. Evil dwells within. Let the seal remain." But I know it will not matter. Curiosity draws men to forbidden things. Someone will open it again. Someone will read the book. Someone will release what I freed, and it will claim them as it claimed me. I die tomorrow. The physician is certain. But death will not free me. I fear what waits beyond. I fear the entity will follow me there. I fear I have damned myself. To those who find this testament, burn the book, destroy the chamber, consecrate the ground. Do not let what I unleashed continue. Do not let others suffer as I have. Please. Brother Kenneth Mackay, Crossraguel Abbey, Ayrshire, Scotland, 30th December 1615. Archive note: Dr. Nathaniel Ashcroft. Brother Mackay's body was found in the sealed chamber on January 1st, 1616. The book he described was never located. The chamber has been sealed multiple times across centuries, yet continues to be rediscovered. Current Abbey records forbid any excavation in that section. End of file. Case closed to public record. The original document remains sealed within the vaults of the British Museum. The NOA archive remains committed to documenting phenomena that defy conventional understanding. These cases are submitted for academic review and further investigation. Further access requires written authorization or curiosity strong enough to ignore the warnings. Until next time, these are the National Occult Archives.